Hey, everybody out there in YouTube and Facebook world. Welcome to my first foray into trying to live stream a mix session here. We do a series of, first of all, let me say my name's Ian Gorman. I am owner and head engineer of La Luna Recording here in Kalamazoo. During the lockdown, we are not doing in-person sessions with clients, but we're doing a lot of remote mixing and mastering work, and so I thought that'd be a great opportunity to try live streaming a mix session for you, walking you through my process, turning it into a tutorial, and hopefully something you can take something away from. So we are live streaming here from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and today we're going to be working on a tune by singer-songwriter Andy Baker, and the song is called The Next Right Thing. I really love this tune, love working with Andy. This is a song I'm really excited to spend some time on and work on and get into next level mix here for y'all. Instead of asking for admission fees to our workshops, or in this case, live stream classes, we are asking if you're able to make a donation to the Michigan Music Alliance's Artist Relief Fund. You can see links here on the Facebook posts and that sort of thing. You can find it all over on Facebook if you're locked into the Michigan music scene at all. We really love what they're doing there. They're helping out a lot of artists, and there are tons and tons of musicians. Almost every musician I know is completely out of work right now, really struggling, and luckily there's a lot of people stepping up to help. So if you're able, consider making a donation to the Artist Relief Fund. If you're not able, no problem. You're welcome anyway. Let's just share some knowledge and talk about some mixing here. So I want to let you know that questions are more than welcome. I'll be checking from time to time on the Facebook page to see if anybody's posting any questions. Feel free to, and I'll try to field them as best I can. There's a little bit of a delay here with the streaming, but we'll see. This is an experiment. I've never done this before, streaming live, so we'll see how this goes here. So great. Let's dive in here. So let's see. What we are working on today, like I said, is a song called The Next Right Thing by singer-songwriter Andy Baker. This is from an upcoming album called North Country Sky that we are in the home stretch of working on. Only a few tunes left to really mix here for it, and it should be coming out pretty soon. I don't know the date. Maybe Andy can chime in if he's listening or watching. Anyway, so this is it's a singer-songwriter Americana tune. This one has a little bit of a country vibe, folk, country rock kind of a vibe to it. Why don't we just start by taking a listen where it's at. So this is just as it is here from our tracking as we've been working on it. As you can see, there are some plugins going on and stuff, but not a whole lot here. I do a lot of analog outboard gear processing when we record, compression and EQ specifically. So a lot of this already has a little bit of sauce on it in the way of EQ and compression, and I'm doing a little bit more here, and we'll certainly do some more today. So this is in rough mix form, I would say, and let's just give a listen to the song all the way through and kind of start to think about what it's going to need here. So I'll go ahead and play it. The Next Right Thing by Andy Baker.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma, cap, and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close. Girl that you just met wants to take you home, but she ain't seen your left hand with the ring, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star, hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. neon lights are shining like a golden token. And you could hit the brakes or keep driving east. And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right when it's a harder road, and you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be. Crying. Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying, but you ain't never loved like this before. And in her eyes you see what you're fighting for. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show her who you are. Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, so hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show who you are. Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Nice. Love that song. Great tune, Andy. Yeah, great plan on that, too. Just so everybody knows who's all involved in this. Andy Baker is playing acoustic guitar and singing. On drums, we have Jeff Maley. Bass is John Austin. On electric guitar is Will Walker. And pedal steel is Drew Howard. Fantastic group together. Really looking forward to working on this. So, as you'll hear, it's already sounding pretty good, I would dare say. I mean, there's certainly some work to do, but I'm already real happy with how it's sounding in the big picture, and that's exactly where I want to be when it comes to mix time. A great mentor of mine early on told me that great albums, great sounding mixes happen in sound check, not mixing, and I really believe that to be true. You got to take the time up front to get your tracking together. Make sure you have the right mics in the right spots. I do a lot of EQ and compression live here while the band is playing using a bunch of analog outboard gear. You can also do that in the box if, depending on your system. If you're using a universal audio system, you can apply plugins while you're recording too. I tend to be really into doing that. I like to get sounds as I go and try to get stuff in the ballpark for a whole bunch of reasons. For one thing, moving a mic an inch is going to have a bigger effect than any plugin that you grab most of the time. Making sure you have the right mics in the right spots and the right sounds in the room, of course, is incredibly important. It's like cooking. You need fresh ingredients. If you got a bunch of stale vegetables, it's really going to make your cooking job a lot more difficult. And I feel the same way about mixing. So we spend a lot of time in sound check to make sure that we have stuff right and that things are sounding good right off the bat. And there's a whole lot of reasons I love doing that. And another reason is, and I'll keep coming back to this all session here, mixing is a big puzzle piece. Everything's got to fit together. It's all about making space for stuff, having things work together. A sound that works great on its own may not work great with a group of other sounds. So you got to think about this as you're putting your sounds together. And, if you don't have at least a pretty good idea what your drums are going to sound like, how do you know what kind of bass sound you want? How do you know what kind of guitar sound you need? That kind of thing. So mixing starts at soundcheck and at tracking. And then, of course, we fine-tune some as we go. You'll see here in my session, I'm not doing a lot of stuff right now. I've got a lot of inactive plugins at the moment, stuff that's on deck in case we need it. But I'm doing some things, a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ as we go. There's a little bit of effects on the vocal already, that sort of thing. And then, of course, adjusting volumes and that sort of thing as we go. But the point is that by the time I get to mixing, I don't want to be starting from scratch with a bunch of raw tracks that need a lot of work. I want to be starting with something that already sounds pretty good and that we are just going to finesse, do detail work, bring to the next level from here. And, part of this is, I feel it's quite beneficial creatively to already have your mix in the ballpark before you start doing the detail work. Our ears get tired listening to stuff over and over again, and you can lose perspective. And if you're entering your mix from scratch and trying to pretend that you haven't already listened to the song 100 times or more and trying to make, from blank slate kind of decisions, okay, let's solo the kick drum. What's the kick drum going to sound like? That kind of thing. I feel like that's much harder to do when you're on the tail end of a project, when you've been hearing the song over and over again and you've gotten used to the way it sounds. So I think there's a lot of benefits creatively to mixing as you go during the tracking process in a rough way. And then also it's just kind of the reality nuts and bolts of dealing with artists that are on a budget, which is all artists. Almost everybody we work with here is an independent artist who is paying for their own projects themselves. Another great reason to support them through the Artist Relief Fund, because they are all scraping by during the best of times, let alone now. And budgets are a very real thing you have to work on. When you're in audio school or you're working on your own projects, sure, you can take all day to work on a mix. But when you're on the clock with a client, you need to be able to move quick. And by the time you get to the mixing stage, you got to be already in the ballpark. I usually spend a couple hours on a mix at the end of a project. I'll go deeper if they want more revisions or, it's an extravagant production we need to spend more time on. But often, I would say 2 hours is pretty average for the amount of time I have to just focus on the mix at the end of a project. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And so for all these reasons, I like to already be in the ballpark when we get to the mixing stage. But okay, enough about the prep that has gotten us to this point. What do we do now? So listening to the song, like I said, I'm happy with the big picture stuff. I'm hearing little things I want to do, little EQ stuff to some of the instruments, a lot of detailed volume work. You'll see here in my session. A side note here, if you don't recognize it, I am working in Pro Tools. Although a lot of what I am talking about today is more general theory and approach to mixing that is applicable in any program that you're using. But we're in Pro Tools here. So you'll see here I'm doing very little volume work already. And if you're familiar with Pro Tools, you'll see my volume automation window has almost nothing on it. If you're not familiar, automation is the process of programming the volume to change throughout the course of a tune. And mixes are full of automation. It is not terribly often that someone will have a mix where they just put the faders in a spot and let it ride. Most of the time, we're making little micro adjustments or sometimes macro adjustments throughout the tune. And that can be as broad of a approach as the guitar needs to be a little bit louder in the chorus, or or the snare drum needs to get bumped up at the bridge to really make it powerful, those kind of things, down to the super micro, like I need to bring up this word right here, this note's getting lost, that kind of thing. And those volume adjustments, automation, can sometimes be very obvious. We want everything to sound natural, of course, to the listener, but sometimes they're very obvious in the sense of like, oh, this part's really pushing here. And other times we're trying to do it very transparently. to just kind of even things out. So right now you'll see there's very little volume automation. There's really nothing except for a fade out at the end of the tune. But in Pro Tools, there's two different ways that you can do volume automation. One is in your volume automation window. You'll see over here, you have different views here. You have waveform, you have, and volume are probably the two most common ones I go to. There's our waveform view, and here is our volume view. Instead of using Pro Tools volume automation, most of the time I prefer to use what Pro Tools calls clip gain. So every one of these blocks you're seeing here, Pro Tools calls a clip. Back in the day, they used to call them regions, and they changed the name, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. Same thing, different name. Every one of these is a clip, and we can split, it's an audio file as well in its basic sense. When you record something in, it creates both. It's an audio file and a clip. And the way I think of it is the clip is it can be part of an audio file or it can be an entire audio file. And you can split up your clips here into multiple clips just using the separate command. And so now all of a sudden we have two clips here. And you'll see here, there is a black line here across the clip. And this is what's called clip gain. And what we can do with this is another volume point. You can see here I can make volume adjustments, and the waveform will reflect those volume adjustments. Why do I use clip gain instead of volume automation? Well, there's a few reasons. The first one is that when you do volume automation instead of clip gain, and let me undo this and I'll go over to some volume automation here. Let's go to, I'm just going to solo up this guitar so we can kind of hear what's going on here. So I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. Here's a wild volume automation adjustment here on the guitar, and we'll play it. Well, it's actually kind of subtle. I was zoomed out. Let's do something more obvious here. So volume automation here on the guitar. See, there it goes, getting louder. And now it's going to be a slow fade back down. This is, of course, nothing we want to do to the song musically right now. It's just for a demonstration. But check out here the faders over here in your mix window. You'll see them react to the volume automation, right? Great. So why am I showing you this? Well, because once you go into volume automation, these faders become programmed. And you cannot just grab a fader. You have to mess with the volume automation if you want to make any volume adjustments at all. Once you start putting in these automation points here, these little white dots here, once you start putting those in, those faders are locked into volume automation. You'll see here now, say we go past our crazy little intro volume thing here on the guitar, and look what happens if I try to move the fader. It just goes right back down to where it was. It's programmed to be here now. And to me, I find that really frustrating. I don't like working that way. I like to have my faders live, so if I want, I'm doing a bunch of relative adjustments to something, say a vocal or, whatever the instrument may be, I also want my fader to be live because I'm doing those relative changes, trying to even it out. But if, say, I want just simply more vocal, yeah, I can go into volume automation and select the whole thing and raise the whole thing. But I would rather just grab the fader and move it. So clip gain allows you to keep doing that, which I really like. Another really important thing is where these volume adjustments are happening in the way of signal flow. So volume, the faders are basically the end of the line of your channel here. Any plugins that you have are going to be before that volume adjustment. So, for instance, on this vocal right here, we've got a little EQ and compression on it right now. This fader is after that compression. So any adjustments I make on the fader here are not going to affect the way it's getting compressed at all. The compression is happening just based off of the original clip, off of the waveform. It's reading that volume, and then I'm doing a volume, it's reacting to that, and then I'm using my fader after that, which can be really nice. That can be great. You're happy with where your compression is or whatever, and you just want to adjust the volume of the output of the compressor to mix your vocal. Cool, great. That works well, but it can also be a really powerful tool to have ability to adjust the volume of it before the compressor. And if you're doing clip gain, then you're at the beginning of the line. The volume fader is basically at the end of the line. Clip gain is at the beginning of the line. So if I make an adjustment to the vocal volume here, for instance, that'll be happening before all of the effects, before the compression and all of that. And to me, I think there's some benefits to that. The more I even things out before the compressor, the less hard the compressor has to work, which is really nice. That can be, if you're relying on a compressor to do all of your volume work, you might have to be working the compressor too hard, and you might have to really be squashing the loud stuff to get it to even out with the quiet stuff. So a lot of times I look at my volume adjustments in multiple stages, and I will try to kind of even things out a little bit before it even hits the compressor, and then let the compressor take it a step farther. And then sometimes I'll do volume automation on the back end after that. So at any rate, clip gain. Clip gain is your friend, and there are many other benefits to clip gain, but those are the most relevant ones for right now. I'm just going to take a second here and check and see if anybody has any questions so far on the old Facebook posts. Okay, well, Picky Fingers here says that Mike Lynch wants more banjo, and man, if the Reverend wants more banjo, then we're gonna have to comply. So if anybody wants to record a banjo track and send it over real quick, we'll get that mixed in here. Sweet. Speaking of that, a little side note, but Andy asked me to play banjo on one of the other tracks of this album. It was really fun, and really honored to get to play a little banjo here on Andy's album. And Mike Lynch is on that tune. So, hey, we are playing together. Sweet. Cool. All right, so where to start with this? So I played it through for you so you heard the big picture. Here are some of the things that I think I want to do. There's a bunch of little EQ and maybe compression things throughout the song that I want to tweak, maybe some reverb stuff, that kind of thing. We already have some of that going on, but I might want to get more detailed about it, finesse it more here. A really important thing that usually happens in the mixing phase is really focusing on, in this case, the lead vocal, which is sort of the, I want to say the centerpiece of the song. Andy writes songs that the lyrics of them are really the heart of the song in a lot of ways. I mean, they're beautiful songs melodically and structurally, but his lyrics are really brilliant, and you got to be able to follow the story that he's telling in the song. And when I am putting together a mix, I always ask myself, what is the most important part of this tune? And that might have many answers. There might be multiple things that are really important in the song. And of course, we want every instrument to sound great and be featured in a nice way and that sort of thing. But like I said before, and I'll say again, mixing is all about space. And you have to make space for things, and you have to make creative decisions about what kind of gets the right away sometimes. A lot of times melodic things will need to support each other, and you got to figure out who is the one getting supported and who's the one supporting. And two people might have very different answers for the same song looking at that, but that's part of the art and part of the creative experience here is looking at a song and going, okay, what is the soul of this song? And in the case of Andy's music, it's the vocal and the lyrics. Obviously, the music is awesome and really important to it. There's a beautiful guitar solo from Will in here and that sort of thing. But we need to make sure that vocal is always the centerpiece. The story that he's telling in his lyrics are the thing that we really want people to latch onto. So that means I'm going to do a lot of detail work to the vocal in a volume sense. Maybe go through the fine-tooth comb and make sure that you can hear everything real clearly and that kind of thing. It also means that I'm going to want to make room for it in the mix, and I'll show you that in a variety of ways. So I know there's going to be a lot of work done to the vocal. And this brings me to something else that I want to address real quick. I'll be addressing it a lot today, I'm sure. But because a mix is all about space and everything fitting together, I like to start a mix with most or all of the elements already in it. I don't like to start a mix, okay, let's solo the kick drum and work on the kick drum. Let's solo the snare and work on the snare. Solo the bass, go through all the tracks like that. I don't like doing that. mostly because it doesn't matter what they sound like soloed. It can be very instructive and helpful to do some detail work when something is soloed. I'm not saying don't solo stuff, but what they sound like soloed and what they sound like in the mix can be very different things. And of course, what they sound like in the mix is what matters. The reason I'm bringing this up right now, because we will most certainly do some soloing and that kind of thing as we work along here, but we always got to zoom back out and look at the whole mix. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because in a tune where the vocal is, the centerpiece or the anchor of the song, I want to start with the vocal there. I don't want to mix the instruments and then put the vocal on top of it later. I want to have that vocal from the beginning so that I can hear how that's interacting with the other instruments, that I can make room for it in other ways. It's to me, if I were to work on the tune for a while just instrumentally and then slap the vocal on top of it, it'd be very different than if I had it there from the beginning and was thinking about it from the start. So I'm going to start playing it from the top, and the first thing I'm going to do is maybe just do a little bit of work to the vocal. I'm not going to get into super detailed work yet, but I want to sketch in the vocal and then kind of work from there. So let's check it out from the top.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Okay, so
And you got to
side note here, as I'm talking while the music plays, feel free to let me know on Facebook how the volume of all that is. I'm wearing headphones and trying to monitor it here, but I'm new to this, so I want to make sure you can hear me over the music, but not so much that it's annoying and distracting. So this vocal track here, so this whole album, we've recorded a combination of at La Luna as well as Andy working from his home studio. He's done most of his vocal and guitar tracks himself at home and some other stuff as well, and sent me those tracks. In the case of this tune, I recorded the bass and drums, and then Andy redid the acoustic guitar, he did Will's electric guitar, and he did his vocal at home. So we have a vocal file that he's just sent me. This already might have some EQ and compression on it. I don't know. I certainly trust Andy to make those decisions and get a sound that he likes. I like the sound of it right off the bat, but we might do some more to it too. Also, Andy's vocal track already has some reverb baked into it that he printed with it. Let's check that out. I got him soloed here.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
Sweet. So I like that. This is unconventional for someone to send me a track that already has an effect baked into it. And to be honest, maybe he meant to send it to me without the reverb. I don't know. But hey, I like the sound of it. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I think it sounds nice the way that it is. So yeah, I could ask him for another vocal that is without reverb. But in this case, I'm going to go forth with it and work with it the way it is. I like the sound of it. My general attitude when people ask me, should I put on my effects? Usually I say yes. I feel like your effects, if you're a guitar player and you're running pedals or amp reverb or just whatever, that's part of your sound. And that affects the way that you play while you're recording it. And I also trust the musicians I work with to get sounds that they like. And in this case, Andy's vocal sounds great, so I'm not worried about it. It's unconventional to work with a lead vocal with reverb baked into it. And please ask your engineer before you send them such a thing, because most would not want it that way. But in this case, I think it's working great, and I'm not worried about it. So let's see what we have going on this vocal here. So I love FabFilter stuff. There's a bunch of different plugins that I really love from a lot of different manufacturers, but man, the FabFilter stuff is awesome. Their EQ and their compressor I use all the time. I also use their multiband multiband compressor, and their peak limiter, their mastering limiter, the L2. I love all that stuff. It's incredibly easy to use, but you can also get very advanced with it when you want to. And it's also very easy on your computer's processing, which is great. You can use a lot of them. You can use them during tracking with zero latency or close to zero latency. Anyway, so let's check out what I have going on here right now.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
Okay, let's start thinking about this EQ.
Diploma, cap, and gown, crumpled on the floor.
So what am I doing here? I've got a little roll off down at 75 hertz. You know, you can pretty much assume most vocals you can throw on a roll off at least as low as 75. You might be able to go up a little higher depending on the tune. Low roll-offs, I use low roll-offs a lot. Once again, it's all about space. And whenever you don't need any stuff way down low, get rid of it. I'm not talking about thinning out stuff or anything like that, but what I am talking about is making room for stuff in the low end. You really want that bass and kick to be hitting, get other stuff out of its way. And most instruments don't have anything that is really particularly musically useful way down low like that. There are some things that will. So I'm not saying low cut everything, but you can low cut a lot of stuff. And some instruments that have stuff way down low, you don't even need it in a mix. It's getting lost, it's just getting muddy, that kind of thing. In this case, a vocal, we don't need anything down below 75. I'm also doing a little dip here around 200 just to take out a little mud. Giving a little boost around 3.6K, it looks like, a little presence boost and a little high-end boost. Let's bypass this for a second and we'll hear just his original raw vocal without the EQ.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
So it sounds nice. I'm digging it.
Diploma, cap, and gown, crumpled on
And then
the
here's
floor.
that vocal popping on.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
You can watch here my cursor here. I'm going to turn it on and off.
You got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close.
Back on.
The girl that you just met wants to
So,
take you home.
To my ear, you know, I'm being careful. These are all relatively small adjustments. I mean, down 0.8 dB at 200 hertz, you know, up 1.2 dB at 3K. It's a subtle difference, but it's clearing up the vocal to me. It's bringing a little bit of presence. I don't want to lose that warmth, but I also want this to pop out of the mix just a little bit. So that's what's doing that for me. And then let's check out our compression here. You know, a lot of times I'll just grab the FabFilter Pro C2 just as kind of some utility compression. A lot of times I'm compressing in multiple stages when I'm working on stuff. I'll use some real light compression live while we're tracking with some analog gear, and then in the mix I'll often do 1 or 2 more compressors on top of that. I find a lot of times multiple stages of really subtle compression, relatively subtle. Sometimes you get extreme, but multiple stages can yield better results than one heavy hitting stage. So let's see what kind of compression we're doing to the vocal.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma, cap, and gown, crumpled on the floor.
So I'm doing a decent bit here, I would say. I mean, it's not extreme, but you can see it's regularly hitting about 4 dB or so of
You
compression.
got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to
Cool.
close.
So I'm going to mess with this setting right here. There's
Girl
different
that you just
styles
met
here in
wants to take you
FabFilter,
home.
and they have a vocal style. I'm going to check this out and
She
hear what the
ain't
difference
seen
is.
your left hand with the ring.
Oh, it just pulled it way down, didn't it?
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star.
But you know what? There's a smoothness that I like about
To
it.
show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve,
Uh-huh.
oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Yeah. I like that. But you know what? Instead of just relying on this FabFilter C2 to do all my vocal compression, I'm going to back it off a little bit. And I'm going to throw on another compressor. Another thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to zoom out and make sure that there isn't some crazy louder part of the tune later that is going to mess up all my compressor settings. It looks real consistent here. So cool. I think we can dial this in from pretty much anywhere in the tune. You can see the choruses are a little bit bigger, as well they should be. But yeah, so I'm going to peel back this Pro C2, and then I'm going to throw on... So the C2 tends to be a little bit more transparent of a compressor. I want to throw on something with a little more flavor, so I'm going to grab a UA plugin. I love UA stuff as well. I use a lot of it. And for years and years, my main interface was a UA Apollo. Stuff just sounds great to me, and I'm a big fan of these analog emulators. Obviously, there's a million different analog gear emulators out there, and what I mean by that is a lot of these pieces of gear are digital recreations of real-life pieces of analog gear, many of which are vintage and incredibly expensive, but are on a million different records. And some of the most common ones you'll find, there's one called an 1176 that you'll see many different plug-in versions of. Looks like this, or the more famous one is a black 1176 instead of the silver. This is coming up here. This is the one you probably see everywhere. Great utility classic compressor. Another one is this LA2A. I'm going to start with the LA2A and just see what we get. Now, a lot of these analog emulator plugins, in addition to compressing, they also add some vibe to it, some sound of some sort. They have a character. And so this is one of the reasons that I'm reaching for this right off the bat, because if I'm going to change the character of this vocal, I want to know that from the beginning, because that's going to affect my other decisions. It's going to affect my EQ. It's going to affect the other elements in the mix, that sort of thing. So I want to see what flavor plugin I want to use here, and or anything. I mean, I was already happy with the sound of it, so maybe this stuff won't even add anything. But let's see. Let's play it and dial in these settings. So with the LA2A type plugins, there are two main controls here. You have peak reduction and gain, and that's it. If you use a lot of compressor plugins, you might be used to a lot more controls than that. The LA2A doesn't have a lot of controls. It basically has how much are you compressing it, and then the gain is the output gain. So how much makeup gain on the back end of the compressor are you adding? There's also a limit and comp switch, which can affect how drastically it's compressing. And then emphasis, it kind of reacts to the EQ curve of the instrument differently. To be honest, I don't mess with emphasis that much. Maybe I should. Maybe I should experiment with it more, but not right now. So let's play this vocal, and I'm going to adjust the peak reduction and then the gain output to kind of see where it needs to be sitting.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
All right, so let's bypass this.
When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing.
Back in.
Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. So I'm trying to even out the volume of it. You know, the volume's going to change as it goes through the compressor, but something you really have to be careful of. So when I first popped on this compressor, you probably heard it, the vocal is just a lot louder. And to our ears, louder always sounds better. Both in the sense of it's just hitting you harder, it's bigger, it's more powerful because it's louder. But also, it has been proven that our ears hear stuff differently at different volumes. It's called the equal loudness contours. It's a really important thing to know if you're mixing audio at all. The same sound turned up louder is going to have a different EQ curve to our ears. And usually that's more real low end and more real high end. So it gets a little bit scooped in a subtle way. And that means it's got more low end energy and oomph and power. It also has more high-end presence, and all you did was turn the thing up to get that. Turning up your speakers will do that. It'll make a mix sound more powerful when you turned up. So you always want to be conscious of that when you're working on stuff. Did I make it better, or did I just turn it up? And a lot of plugins boost the volume, and all of a sudden you put it on and go, oh, hey, that sounds better. Well, even out the volume and see if it really sounds better, because maybe it does, or maybe you just made it louder and it sounds bigger to you. So in this case, I'm trying to sort of even it out to decide if I want to use this LA2A a little bit. So let's try it again. I'm going to go maybe to the start of this verse here.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
And let's bypass it.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Back on.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
Yeah, cool. I'm really liking it. It is a little bit louder with the plugin, but I can also, say, I'm conscious of that. But I also like the tone better. It sounds a little smoother and fuller to me with this compressor on. So cool. I'm not even going to mess with the other 1176 option here. I'm just going to keep that off, and we're going to keep rolling here. So I'm doing 2 stages of compression to this vocal. I'm hitting it hopefully subtly. We'll see here in a second with the FabFilter Pro C2, and then a medium amount with the LA2A. And if you're thinking of asking, how much do I compress a vocal? Well, that changes all the time, and you just got to use your ears. In general, if I'm going more than a few dB at a time with a compressor, I might want to be conscious of that and really think about that. But there's no magic number. And I can't tell you how many times I've been doing a tracking session and I've heard an instrumental lead vocal or something, and I'm just sitting here at the console in front of the speakers going, man, it sounds great. I love how this vocal is sounding. And I'll look over at the compressor I'm using and I'm squashing it. And it'll make me go, oh, am I compressing it too much? And it's like, wait a second. You just told yourself how much you like the sound of it. So use your ears and not your eyes. You want to be careful to not paint yourself into a corner by over compressing something that you can't uncompress later. But in general, if it sounds good, it is good, and there's no magic answer to that. Some vocals need to get squashed, other ones need to breathe more, and that's a creative decision as well as situationally dependent. So let's take a look here to the compression that we're doing on this vocal here.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got
Sweet.
to decide
I'm really happy with
who
that.
you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you
Cool. So that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting of the vocal to me, which is great. We're going to want to do some detail work too and not just totally rely on that compressor, but that's got it in the ballpark, and it's good enough to move on now to something else. And you'll see here in my plugins list, I'm doing EQ and then the compression. People ask all the time, what order should you do things? There is no correct answer. You can do it either which way. And I switch off what I'm doing all the time, but one of the benefits and reasons to EQ before a compressor is if you want to be cleaning something up in the signal before the compressor, because you don't want the compressor reacting to something that you don't want in there anyway. In this case, I got this low cut, I've got a little low mid dip. I don't want the compressor reacting to anything down here that I'm going to cut out anyway. So I'd rather clean that up. And sometimes in more extreme cases, you have a frequency that's really popping out that's driving you crazy, something boomy or something really harsh in the mid-range. I'll want to smooth that out before it hits the compressor so the compressor is not reacting to the stuff that I don't want in there anyway. On the other hand, sometimes I'm real happy with the sound and I want to add an EQ after a compressor because I don't want to mess with the way the compressor is working, that sort of thing. So, it just depends. So right now on this vocal, we've got an EQ, a couple compressors, and nothing else right now. If you're just joining me, Andy's vocal here that we're messing with has a little bit of reverb already baked into it that was in his session at home that he sent over. So you're hearing a little reverb, even though I'm not sending it anywhere right now. But this is a good time to talk about some effects. So when I set up a mix, there are 3 effects that I will often set up from the beginning just to get started with. And you'll see here I've already got 2 of them set up in the session. I have one that is called room verb, verb short for reverb, of course, and then plate verb. What do these mean? Well, they're both different reverbs. The room verb I tend to think of as a smaller, more natural room sound, which is why I call it room verb. It's something that I don't want to sound like a big, affected thing. It's supposed to be really subtle and kind of being used to make stuff 3-dimensional in a way. And you'll see here that bus 3 and 4 send is going to my room verb. And right now I've got mostly drums going there, a little bit of acoustic guitar, that sort of thing. So it's kind of my drum reverb, if you want. I think of it like a real space with a bunch of musicians in it, and you're going to hear a little bit of that room on everybody to some extent. And so I set that up. And then I also have a plate reverb that is off right now, but let's Well, we may not even need that with the fact that there's already a little reverb baked into the vocal here. But in general, the plate will be a bigger vocal reverb. And plate is a kind of reverb. It's an old school way of getting reverb, an analog way that is actually based in a giant metal plate suspended in a box. And the plate would vibrate, kind of like if you have a aluminum pan or something and you shake it or bang it, it kind of has a reverberance. It's the same kind of idea. Spring reverb is very similar. And the sound of those plates is the sound of a million records, and especially a lot of classic stuff. And it can just sound beautiful on things, and especially vocals. Is it always the right thing? No, nothing's ever the right thing for across the board. But a lot of times plate reverbs sound great on vocals, so I'll set up one of those as well. And then on top of that, I often like doing a little slapback echo here. So I'm going to set one up here. We'll call it EP4. Well, yeah, I'll make something a little. That's the name of the delay that I'm going to use, but we'll just call it delay for right now. So I'm just going to take a second and check in, see if there are any comments I need to check out. Aaron writes requesting more vocal. All right, Aaron, we'll take care of you. Sweet. Yeah. Cool. That's catching up. Yeah, Fletcher Munson. Tom Dieter gave a shout out to Fletcher Munson. That is one of the names of the studies that shows the equal loudness contours. The other one I think is Robinson Dadson, something like that. Anyway, doesn't matter. But yeah, Fletcher Munson, so crucial. Equal loudness contours. Okay, so we're back here to adding a little slapback delay. What does slapback delay mean? Well, there are all kinds of different delays that you can do, and some can sound like big trails. And other ones can be more on the side of what we call slapback, which is a one-time delay, usually, that is super fast. And the way I think of it is it's not really supposed to sound like a trail. It is supposed to, I think of it more like a shadow behind the vocal or something like that, something to make it pop out a little three-dimensional. And sometimes it's real prominent. You listen to a rockabilly tune or something like that. That heavy slapback delay is a crucial part of that sound. But in a lot of kinds of music, a slapback is used much subtler. And we use them all the time on stuff. And when I'm working with Americana roots music, I always want to be real subtle with my effects. Well, not always. Some people like getting out there, and that's always fun. But a lot of times you're trying to do something that feels organic and natural. That doesn't mean that you're not doing a lot of little things to it, but those have always got to not be distracting and be kind of subtle and, different color choices and that kind of thing. So let's see. I'm going to get me another send here from Pro Tools to send to my slapback delay here. For the slapback, you'll see I'm using a UA recreation of an Echoplex. I love the sound of Echoplexes, and there's all kinds of different modeling plugins out there of the Echoplex EP. Well, originally these were the EP3 and EP4 were the famous versions. UA kind of made one that was a blend of both. They called it the EP34. But anyway, little tape delay kind of sound here. So let's get this set up here. Bus 5 and 6. Send the vocal to there. So I'm going to start with the delay real cranked so we can hear what we're doing. This is an extreme situation.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
So you hear it's just like a
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
It's just a quick one-time delay after the vocal.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Back on.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
Now, obviously, that's way too much. But, well, for this tune, maybe some songs that'd be perfect. But okay, so how do we deal with the timing? Well, this song was recorded to a metronome, so we have a tempo built into the session. A lot of times with delays, I'm thinking about the tempo of the song, and my starting point will often be trying to make a delay that fits the timing of the song, 8th note, 16th note, whatever. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. There are online charts you can use. There are apps you can download. If you don't have let me back up a second and say this. If you know the BPM of your song, and it's recorded to a click, this is easy. Most plugins will even allow you to sync it to the BPM of the session. That's what this button here does. If you don't know your BPM, or if your song was not recorded to a click, there's still a lot of ways you can do this. You can get a tap tempo app or something like that to kind of figure out the rough BPM of the song, and then you can use an app or an online website to look at a chart of BPM to milliseconds. So you can go, okay, well, this song is at approximately whatever BPM, that equals, an eighth note is this many milliseconds, and you can figure out your delay times that way. An engineer named Jeff Lane that I assisted a lot earlier in my career would have me, just as a matter of course, when I was assisting him, he would have me set up a bunch of delays to eighth notes, 16th notes, that kind of thing, and have them all patched in and ready to go. So he could just reach up on his board. He used so many delays regularly, as a lot of people do, that he just wanted, so whatever this knob, Ogson 3 on his board would go to an eighth note, and Ogson 4 would go to a 16th note, or whatever. And so part of my job as an assistant would be to figure out the BPM of the song before the session even started, get everything programmed and set and ready to go. We use short little delays like this all the time in mixes in really subtle ways to try to make stuff three-dimensional. So in this case, I don't need to figure out the timing here. We've got a sync button. And you see when I flip on that sync, all of a sudden we're talking in musical terms here instead of milliseconds. So let's start. My guess is about a 16th note given the tempo of this song. Let's start here and listen to this.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
Nice. I like that.
Diploma, cap, and gown, crumpled on.
What does it sound like if we go to a eighth note?
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Now that's a cool trippy delay, but I don't think that's what we're looking for this tune. I'm going to move it back to a 16th note and then turn it down, and we want it to be real subtle, just like I said, a little shadow or something behind the lead vocal.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma, cap, and gown, crumpled on the floor.
I'm going to turn it down just a little bit more. I want you to barely even notice
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Now turn it off.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
And back on for this next verse.
3 a.m. bar's about to close.
Back off.
The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
Cool. I'm going to turn it down even more. I want it to barely be there.
She ain't seen your left hand with the ring. And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Sweet. I like that. It's subtle. It just kind of, I want the vocal to just feel a little three-dimensional. It's not so much I want it to feel like it has an effect on it. So I'm going to leave that there for now. And something else I'm hearing in the vocal now is that I'm hearing a lot of sibilance in Andy's voice. And that is not uncommon when you're doing a lot of compression to also have a lot of sibilance come out. Because sibilance, by sibilance, I mean these pointy little S sounds like you're hearing right now, sibilance. Those sounds tend to actually be pretty quiet in volume. If you look at a waveform, a lot of times they're much quieter than other things, but man, they poke through. And so when you're compressing stuff, it has a tendency to let those little annoying little S sounds through, but really compress other parts of the vocal. So it can have the effect of bringing up the S sounds. So what do we want to do about this? I want to use, well, there's different things you can do. The most classic thing is to use a de-esser, which does exactly what it says. It removes the S's. Basically, a de-esser is a multi-band compressor just focused on S sounds. So I'm just going to use a multi-band compressor and make it do that. If you're not familiar with a multi-band compressor, so without getting too much into what compression is right now, because that could be a whole workshop on its own, compression is adjusting the dynamic range of a sound, the range of quiet to loud, and compressing it so that the range from the quietest sound to the loudest sound is less. And there's all kinds of different ways you can do this, and I'm not going to get into all those details right now because that'd be a huge aside. But basically you're controlling the volume of things. What a multi-band, and I'll put it this way, you're taking the loud stuff and making it a little bit quieter with a compressor is usually what you're doing. A multi-band compressor does that same thing, but it will do it to just a specific frequency range. And so what I want to be compressing just those little pointy S sounds. So I just created a band here. Let's check it out.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
And we'll be able to see here in this frequency response graph, those S's are going to pop out pretty soon. I'm guessing it's going to be about here.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Yep. But it's the next verse they really get
You
strong.
got to decide
There we go.
3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
Cool. So what we're doing is we're throwing on a compressor that is just focusing on those S sounds. It's leaving the rest of the signal alone. Let's find a good example here. See, I'm soloing just that band on the vocal so you can hear the area that we're compressing. This is supposed to sound nasty because we're just soloing the thing we want to get rid of. So that's always nice. Hey, let's solo the worst part of the sound and just really focus on that for a minute. But this is what we're looking to do the multi-band compression on. Cool. You can also hear my chair squeaks in here now. I have a very squeaky chair that probably has no place in a recording studio. But hey, that's how it goes. So I unsoloed that band. I unsoloed the vocal. So let's do some de-essing here now.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star.
Gonna go a little bit farther on it.
Brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Cool. So I want to be careful. I don't want to go too far because it might really darken the sound of the vocal too much. Or worse yet, if you go too far with a de-esser, you can make someone sound like they have a lisp in there. And so I'm trying to just take the edge off and do something natural here. Let's back up to maybe the verse where some of the really prominent S sounds are.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
Bypassed.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you just met wants.
So that's a good line. Let me bypass it again.
The girl that you just met wants.
Hear how those S sounds are really pointy? You could grab an EQ and try to take out high end out of the vocal, but I don't want to darken the sound of the whole vocal. I just want to control these spots. So that's what this multi-band compressor, or you can think of it as a de-esser, is doing for me.
The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
Great.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring.
Awesome.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
So in the big picture, I'm pretty happy with the vocal right now. I'm most definitely going to come back and do some more detailed work to it later. But the way that I mix a lot of the time, I don't just focus on one instrument or one element of the mix and spend a lot of time on that and try to get that finished and then go to the next element. It's all about how everything is interacting together. So I'll bounce around and chip away at the mix from different angles. I just wanted to sketch in the vocal for now so that I know what I'm working with there. I've got something to start to form stuff around. So I'm going to move on to some other elements of the mix. Let's take a listen from the top.
"3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the
Cool.
floor.
So the next thing I'm going to go to is the acoustic guitar. In a lot of acoustic roots-based singer-songwriter music, the acoustic guitar is in a lot of ways the musical soul of the song. Now, like what I was talking about before, with Andy's music, his vocal and the lyrics are something that we always got to make sure are the centerpiece. But a lot of this music is based in someone playing acoustic guitar and singing. And so the acoustic guitar is a rhythm thing usually. In this song, it's all rhythm, just playing chords and that kind of thing. But it's kind of the heart of the music. This whole thing should be centered around Andy singing and playing acoustic guitar. So now, of course, don't get me wrong, everybody else is quite important here too, but I want to start to sketch in that acoustic guitar from the beginning as well and make sure that that is something that other things are going to work nicely with. So let's check out the acoustic. Cool. Recorded in stereo. Right now we've got the mics panned basically hard left and right. I don't know how that guy got to 95 instead of 100, but whatever. Whoa. Hey. We'll see if we stick with that or not. So with all stereo sounds, something you have to be really careful about is phase. Phase, basically, long story short, is whenever you have more than one sound source, I'm sorry, let me start that over. Whenever you have more than one microphone or input from the same sound source, those two signals can mess each other up in different ways. With phase, so sound is all pushing and pulling air, creating vibrations. Kind of think of it like throwing a pebble into a pool and seeing those ripple of waves. That's very much what sound does to the air. And so it's push, pull, little vibrations and waves. And so when you see a picture of a sine wave, it looks like a big wave going positive, negative, positive, negative. I don't have a picture here handy, but I'm sure you've seen those. The problem is when two different microphones, in this case, combine, if they're not exactly lined up with when they're positive and negative, if one is positive when the other is negative or vice versa, they can cancel each other out. You can kind of think of it like simple math. What is 10? So, all right, say one sound is going up on its wave, and we'll call that 10, and the other sound is down at the bottom of its wave, and it's minus 10. You combine them together, 10 plus negative 10 equals 0. They'll cancel each other out. And that's very much what phase cancellation is doing. So whenever you have more than one mic or input source on a sound, you always want to make sure that they're in phase together. How can you do that? There's all kinds of different ways you can do that. You can use different phase meters and that kind of thing. I usually use my ears. I've done this enough that I can hear when there's phase problems and that kind of thing. And a real quick way to tell, so I've got this plugin here called the Panipulator. I just have this on my master fader. This doesn't do any kind of effect processing to the sound at all. This is kind of a utility. You can think of it like a control room monitor options. And you'll see here, it'll flip the left and right sides, which can be really useful when you're trying to figure out symmetry. It can also flip the polarity or phase of one of the sides, and you can put things into mono. And it's really useful to use this when you're checking mixes. So let's listen to the acoustic guitar here. So this sounds pretty nicely in phase to me right off the bat. I bet if I flip one of these polarities, it's going to get crazy here. Let's try flipping the phase of one of the mics. See, yeah, it's weird. Let's flip it back. Hear how when I flip the phase, the center kind of disappears and you hear the sides really well. It also creates what to me is kind of a weird, swimmy, kind of seasick feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but out of phase stuff just makes me feel funny, and not in a way that I like. And this is really important to think about. So this would be considered pretty out of phase. Put it back. See, it sounds fuller. It sounds more focused now. If this was out of phase, what would we do? Well, during a tracking session, you should be checking this and moving mics accordingly and that kind of thing. You can also scoot around your waveforms in your session to make stuff more in phase. They also make all kinds of plugins that can do that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do when something is out of phase. But so check it out. When I'm playing it and you hear me flip the phase, all of a sudden it gets this really wide, kind of trippy stereo thing, right? Now, the thing about this, I don't really love that sound. It sounds, like I said, it sounds funny to me, but I know a lot of people that love messing with putting stuff out of phase and panning it in mixes because of that really crazy wide stereo that it does. I know people that do that with room mics or drum overheads, or you'll take one channel of an instrument, you have two mics on something and you bump one a little bit to get that phasey thing going. And in a mix, it can make it sound really wide, which can be cool. But there's some problems with this. And the biggest problem is when things are out of phase, when you pan them like this, yeah, it sounds really wide and crazy. But if you flip this to mono, it is going to really mess with the sound. So let's try this. Let's play our acoustic guitar. We're back in phase. Then let's flip it to mono. So these are two guitar signals in phase, more or less. There's, no such thing as perfect phase when you're using multiple mics, but they're pretty close. And it's in mono now. When I flip back and forth, it obviously gets smaller in the center, but the character of the sound is pretty similar. So, it sounds bigger and better in stereo to me, but check out what happens when we flip the phase now. So, okay, now we got our trippy wide stereo thing with the guitar, but check out what happens in mono now. Whoa. Put it back in phase. Out of phase. It gets thinner and smaller. And a lot of times, if you have things really strongly out of phase and you put it in mono, they can get way quieter and disappear significantly. This is incredibly important these days because so many people are listening in mono. Most people's phones are mono or close to. Some phones have two little tiny speakers right next to each other that are basically, for all intents and purposes, mono. And then a lot of phones just straight up are mono. Phone speakers, a lot of laptop speakers, a lot of Bluetooth speakers are in mono. So I don't mix for mono. I think about stereo. And that's, I mix for people that are listening in stereo, but how it sounds in mono is super important. And if something really crucial to your mix disappears in mono, that's a real problem. So let's, so watch out for those phasey little tricks because maybe they're cool in stereo, but they might disappear on you in mono. Not that long ago, I mastered a project for a band that had one electric guitar and bass and drums. They're a power trio. And the mixing engineer panned the guitar to one side and added a tiny little delay and panned that to the right side. So the guitar had this big stereo thing, which is a really common technique and a really a great way to treat one guitar sometimes. However, the two sides were not playing well together with phase. They were out of phase. And when the mix got collapsed to mono, the guitar almost entirely disappeared from the mix. And this was a heavy, hard rock metal album. And thinking everybody listening to it on their phones and having almost zero guitar in it, it would have been better to figure out a different solution to make that guitar sound huge. So anyway, back to where we're at here. Let's listen to this guitar. Let's make sure we're back in stereo. We're back in phase. Cool. So this is where I'm going to start to think about the composition of this mix in the way of stereo left to right. What are our elements? We got drums, we got electric bass, we got acoustic guitar. We have an electric guitar that plays throughout most of the tune, rhythm style. We have a pedal steel riffing throughout most of the tune, and we have a guitar solo later on. I'm not going to worry about the solo yet. So I like to think about symmetry with mixing. If something's going to be panned to one side, I want something of a similar weight or substance or attention level panned to the other side. That doesn't mean they have to be like that for the whole tune. Sometimes, you're working on a song and there's a guitar pan to the left and the guitar pan to the right doesn't come in till the second verse or something. Cool. It doesn't have to be even the whole time. But in general, I'm thinking about symmetry, and if something heavy and attention getting is going to be on one side, I want something to balance it on the other. So what I'm thinking about right now is how I want to balance, panning wise, these guitars and the pedal steel. So in this one, oh, that's right, we actually have two guitars. Yes, I remember now. Two electric guitars. I mean, I had made a suggestion to Andy at one point of sending me 2 tracks of Will's rhythm parts so we could pan them left and right for some cool symmetry. So cool. So we've got 2 electrics that I'm going to pan because they're playing almost the same thing. They're doubles of each other. And then the acoustic guitar and the pedal steel. The pedal steel, well, let's see here. Let's start over. I'm probably going to want to move that a little bit off center because I want to watch out for Andy's vocal and kind of just keep it a little bit off Andy's vocal.
And you're driving home
Why am I thinking about the pedal steel right now when I'm talking about the acoustic guitar? Because that's going to affect where I put the acoustic guitar and how I pan
Your
that.
buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m.
So I'm going to mute the vocal for just a moment here and think about the acoustic. So right now I've got the pedal steel panned. Let's see here. I'm going to try putting it, well, it's kind of a coin flip which side to put it on. I'm going to put it just slightly right of the vocal for now and move that acoustic guitar just slightly to the left. I don't want to go extremely left like this, because then the song's going to feel unbalanced to me. The acoustic guitar is so integral to the rhythm of the song. But I'm going to go slightly left. And what I'm doing there is we have a stereo guitar, so I'm keeping the left one all the way left, and then the right side I'm moving just a little bit, 40% or so right now. So the acoustic guitar doesn't feel way off to one side, but it's a little emphasized on the left. And this will leave me a little bit more room for the pedal steel, I think. Bring back in that vocal.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
I might split the difference and go a little bit further more towards center with the acoustic. Great. So you know what? Now I'm thinking I want to do maybe a little EQ and compression of this acoustic guitar. Because they're on two separate tracks, I want to create a master track for both of them so I can treat them together. So, new stereo aux input. There we go. My main mix path right now is bus 29 and 30 instead of the main mix. I'll get to why I do that maybe a little later, because that's a whole thing. But that's why I'm assigning it there, and I'm going to find a bus I'm not using. Let's say bus 11 and 12, and then these guys, instead of sending them out to my main mix, I'm going to send them over to this aux fader here, which I'm going to name, of course, Acoustic Guitar Master. Cool. So now the mix should sound exactly the same, except we're routing through this aux fader here. And now I can put on some stuff on here and affect both of these acoustic guitar mics at the same time. Cool. So the thing that I'm hearing in here first, well, I'm going to throw on a low cut just because we don't need a bunch of that junk down there. Make a little more space for the bass and kick. You'll hear here I'll bypass this low cut. I mean, it's doing barely anything to the sound. When it's soloed, you can hear there's a little bit less bass in there, but I think that's going to be arbitrary in the mix. But it's cleaning up that mud. And then the next thing I'm hearing, there's a little bit of kind of a low-mid wolfiness in here I want to get out. So I'm going to boost like crazy and try to find the thing that's bugging me. Yeah, that kind of stuff right there. Let's get a little more specific. Yeah, there it is. Let's dip that a little bit. Let's put it back in the mix.
When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. The acoustic guitar still sounds like a little too wide of a stereo thing to me in this mix. So this is a great time to talk about how you might treat something very different when it's on its own than when it's in a mix. If this song was just vocal and acoustic guitar, then you have kind of a blank check to get as big of a guitar sound as you want, make it super stereo, all that stuff, really deep bass and everything. But when the guitar is playing a role in a mix with other instruments, you got to think about making space for everybody. And so I'm taking out some low end there that I don't know if I would if this was just a solo acoustic guitar tune, but in this case, it's working well with others. I'm also thinking about my panning here. Let's see, I'm going to redo my panning here a little bit and make those choices on my AUX faders here. The acoustic guitar sounds a little unnaturally wide to me compared to the rest of the band. If this was just Andy singing and playing guitar, maybe that would work great. But in this case, I kind of want it to be a little bit more focused and specific in the mix. I'm going to try bringing in the sides a little bit more, and I'm bringing in the right a little bit further to just bump the guitar just slightly to the left. I don't want it to sound unbalanced, but I want to leave a little room for the pedal steel that's slightly to the right. Cool. That's sounding more natural to me, and then I want to see what a little compression sounds like on here. I don't always compress acoustic guitar, but sometimes it can be really nice. Just thinking something real light.
Pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be.
Increasing my attack time to keep a little bit of that sparkle of the attack of the pick in there.
The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
Off.
But she ain't
Back
seen
on.
your left hand with the ring.
Yes, I like what that's doing. It's real subtle.
And you got
Barely
to
doing anything.
decide who
You know,
you're gonna be.
a dB or so.
So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve,
And then I'm going to turn up the acoustic guitar just a touch in the
oh,
mix.
do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right
Cool.
thing.
So let's start to build the rest of the tune. Let's think about those drums and bass.
3 a.m. The casino's open. Them neon lights are shining.
Cool.
Like a golden
So in
ticket.
general, I'm really happy with how the drums and bass are sounding. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. One mistake that I see a lot of engineers make, that I used to make a lot early on in my career too, is I felt like I had to mess with everything to really be mixing it. Like I felt like if I wasn't EQing and compressing everything in the mix, then I wasn't engineering enough or whatever. And I just feel like that's not true at all now. I feel like if something sounds great, don't mess with it. It's not like every knob is an improvement knob. Sometimes the best thing to do is to leave stuff alone. That being said, there's some stuff I want to do here, but the point is, you don't have to go through and throw on a plugin on every track to really be mixing it. Sometimes things sound great and you can just leave them. And in general, I really like how the drums and bass are sounding on this tune. They might need a little work, but I don't want to take this thing way into left field here. I think it's working really well as it is right now. And of course, a lot of the sounds that I've, built in this tune are all kind of on the foundation of how those drums and bass sound. If I went through and drastically changed the drums and bass at this point in the game, it'd be kind of the equivalent of trying to rebuild the foundation of your house. You know what I mean? Like I've built everything on this. So I don't mind messing with it some, but I don't want to go into outer space. I don't think it needs it, and I also don't want to create a domino effect of other problems with the tones in the tune. So let's give a listen, though. See what this needs. Cool. So I want to hear a little bit more snare right off the bat.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and
Let's hear those drums by themselves for a moment. Cool. So when it comes to drums, this is another place where you got to be careful not to solo too much, because these drums are coming through all of these mics, and what it sounds like through everything is what's important, not what it sounds like soloed. Soloing stuff can be really helpful for hunting down problems and doing detail work, but it's all got to work together. And you'll see here, how did we record these drums? Let's go through this here. So we've got a kick in and kick out mics, mic in the sound hole, sound port, whatever you call it, of the kick drum, and then that was a Beta 52. You'll see here down at the bottom, when I record stuff, I put my signal chain in it. So I have this as a reference for later. And so that's really helpful when talking about it right now. We've got a Shure Beta 52 with a little bit of compression from my UA 710 inside the kick. Then we've got a Neumann 103 with a little compression from a DBX 160 on the outside. The snare was a good old Shure 57 through a vintage Altec mic pre I love very much, through an Avalon 2055 EQ and a little 160X compression. So as you see here, I'm already doing some compression to the drums. I don't have any compression mostly on them in the mix, but I was already doing that live. Toms were Cascade Fathead ribbons. Overheads were a pair of Neumann 184s with a little bit of compression from my Vintech 609CA. We also had a hat mic, pretty dry, nothing going on there. Then the room mic, stereo rooms, getting compressed with a Stam SA4000, which is an SSL style compressor. I also was using what I call a kit mic. It's kind of a random sort of Hail Mary extra mic that I'll put up that I'll throw through some stuff and sometimes compress kind of heavily or sometimes even distort, throw it through a fuzz pedal or something. In this case, I wasn't really doing any of that, and I didn't really like what it was adding, so I haven't muted. But this is what the kit mic is. Go to where these drums come in. Here we go. Just going through stuff. Here's that kick in. Sounds a little funny on its own. Once again, doesn't matter what it sounds like on its own. Kick out. Both the close mics on the kick sound pretty weak by themselves, but check out, when I say weak, I mean like they don't have a lot of oomph. But check out the full drum mix. That kick sounds huge in the full mix once we have the overheads and the room mics and all the bleed. So I'm not looking for the close mics on the kick to give me that oomph. I'm looking for them for the attack. And so that's why soloed they sound the way they do, because it doesn't matter what they sound like soloed. It's about being a team player here. Here's the snare, top snare. Then I also had a mic on the bottom snare. Just getting a lot of that rattle. The toms, I don't know where a tom fill is, so we'll skip those for now. The overheads, mostly focusing on the cymbals and kind of overall kit sound. A little close mic on the hat in case we need a little mix flexibility there. Well, he's not playing it right now. Let's back up. Well, we're not hearing that right now. And then the stereo room mics. And then everything together again. Let's bring back in that kit mic. Maybe I was wrong about that. Let's decide whether that should be in the mix or not. Nah, I like it better without. Oops. Hey, we didn't mean to turn down all those drums. I just want to turn down that kit mic. Yeah, we don't need that. And then let's hear what it sounds like with the bass. So on the bass, we have a DI and an amp. I'm using, I would say, I don't know, roughly 60-70% DI versus amp. This is John Austin playing the bass, Jeff Maley playing the drums. Love working with those guys. So the bass DI, real clean. A lot of attack and presence, which I like. And then the bass amp, giving us a little bit more warmer mid-range kind of sound on the bass. In general, I like the DI sound better, but the amp is adding a nice little kind of body to it. Then with the drums. Cool. So one thing that I want to think about right now is the way the kick and the bass are playing together here. So once again, mixes are all about space and creating space for each other. And a great EQ approach when you're working on a mix isn't... So once again, you can't think of things like they're in a vacuum. They're not. They're playing with other instruments. And something you can do is you can... for instance, with the kick and bass, I want them to play well together. I can go into the bass and carve out frequencies that are really prominent in the kick and vice versa, and sort of carve out spots for each of them. So let's see here. We can do this very easily with the FabFilter EQ. So I'm going to bring on this FabFilter EQ. It's just flat right now, the Pro Q2. And then let's also bring it on. I'm just going to worry about the bass DI right now because that's a prominent mic in the mix. So check this out. With the Pro Q2, you can go in and look at the frequency response of another track that has the Pro Q3 that has that plugin on it. You can overlay it and look at them together. So I'm on the bass track right now. I'm going to pick the kick in to look at here and check out what we get. Whenever the song starts here. So now we're looking at both the bass here in white and the kick in red at the same time. I'm on the bass channel, but check it out. The fundamental of the kick drum is right in the same range as kind of the root of the tune, which is a cool thing for tuning. My buddy Dan Rickabis, if he's listening, he'll often tune his toms to notes that work in the key of the tune, which is really awesome. But in this case, there might be a little bit of a traffic jam down there. So the question is, how can I carve that out? Let's go look over at the kick mic. So I'm looking at the kick in, because that's kind of the prominent mic in my mix right now. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, but bring the bass up, kind of overlaid with it. So let's start back over and go back to the root of the tune. So I want to try to carve out a little frequency in the kick here where the bass is really rocking that one chord. Let's hear it in the mix.
The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
And now I can raise up the kick a little bit, so it's going to not compete with the bass as much.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
So once again, the kick sounds funny on its own, but in the mix. So cool. I'm carving out that frequency that's sort of competing in the bass a little bit. I might try just shifting it a little bit just to see what happens if I go up a little higher. Let's bring the bass back in so we can hear how they're playing together. FabFilter buttons have these, FabFilter plugins have these undo and redo buttons, which is really cool. Let me try undoing it and hear what frequency is serving me better here. I'm going to go back to the verse because it's a little bit more straightforward of a beat there. Yeah, I like this frequency better. I feel like the kicks hit me a little bit harder, which I like. So let's see. Let's go back to our bass here. Is there a frequency range that we could boost on the bass a little bit that stays out of the range of the kick? You can see the kick here in red. The fundamental's really around here on the kick. What if we go just a little bit above that and boost something in the bass? In this case, around 100 hertz or so. So kind of over where the kick is. I'm trying to EQ the kick and bass in different spots so that they are filling up kind of different frequency ranges a little bit and could be heard more individually.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring. And you you got to decide.
Yeah, I think that's working nice.
So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em
I'm also going to turn up the overheads a little bit and get a little bit more of that ride cymbal
when
going.
temptation's pulling at your sleeve. Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. So I'm kind of mentally zooming back out now a little bit.
The casino's open.
Let's listen to these
Neon
electric
lights
guitars. Cool, so I'm going to reach for a low pass. I heard a little bit of kind of muddy low-end rumble in that guitar on the right especially. And once again, I want to be leaving space for that bass and kick. I want those guys to be the king of the low end here. And, you know, not that I want to gut out everything else in the tune, but bass and kick have right away in the low end. And so let's just make sure we got a little bit of space for them here, a little low cut. And then with these guitars here, I'm treating them kind of similarly because they're two different takes of the same performance. So they have the same sonic situation going on. I hear a little mid-ranginess I wouldn't mind scooping out of here. I'm on the one on the right, obviously, trying to find that. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. I want to take that back just a little bit. But I also want to give it maybe just a little bit of high-end boost so I'm not getting too muffled with it. So I'm taking out some mid-range, and I'm just going to copy that over to the other guitar here. Oops. Hold on. Pro Tools moving a little slow because we're streaming from the same computer. Computer's working hard today. But yeah, let's, okay, copying that over to the guitar on the left. Let's put it back in the mix.
And the baby's crying.
Right when the guitar goes out. Let's start from the top again. So I like these guitars hard panned. They're doubled. They're playing something real. They're the same part basically, but different performances.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
I'm gonna turn them down just a touch.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m.
Cool. Let's think about that pedal steel. You'll notice I'm bouncing around a lot, but like I said before, that's what I like to do. I don't want to just get bogged down working on one element of the mix. I want to keep moving around for a couple reasons. It's all about how things relate to each other and that kind of thing, but also it's a good perspective thing. You spend too long on something, you can get way too zoomed in, and sometimes it's good to step back and come back to it. So the pedal steel, I want to start to fix this in now. Real happy with the sound here. This is the Captain Drew Howard playing the pedal steel. Always love working with Drew. Let's see. I'm hearing a little mid-range once again. A little bite in the mid-range. I just want to take the edge off of a little bit. Let's hear this pedal steel. Yeah, you can hear it especially on that first note. There's kind of that bite somewhere in the mid-range. Let's find that. This is going to get ugly for a second because I'm going to boost it. Yeah, that business there. Let's carve that out a little bit. We can also do another low cut. We don't need anything way down low on the pedal steel. Then I might add just a little low mid warmth in there too. In this case, you know, I don't know. I want to bring it back into the mix to make that judgment though. Cool, I'm gonna go a little bit farther down on that mid-range cut. Maybe add a little sparkle up top just to compensate.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m.
Nice. Yep, I'm digging that.
The girl that you.
So a reminder to everybody about a couple of things. One is that we are trying to raise money, we being I'm just sitting here broadcasting from my computer live for you, trying to raise money for the Michigan Music Alliance's Artist Relief Fund. If you are so able and compelled, check out the link in our Facebook post here and see if you can help out in any way. It'd be incredibly appreciated. Tons and tons of artists are now basically unemployed entirely or mostly at best. A lot of people are hurting. A lot of people need help, and there's kind of a funny irony to the fact that when we're all in quarantine land, we all reach for the arts first. We're listening to music and watching movies and watching TV shows and all this stuff. And man, those artists need our support and our love here during a very tough time. Anybody in the performing world has basically had their schedule just completely wiped clean with no income coming in. And so anyway, the Michigan Music Alliance is stepping up to do what they can to help with the Artist Relief Fund. They raised a ton of money last weekend with their streaming music festival all weekend. And if you are so able and inclined, give a donation to help some people that could really use it right now. Also, if you have any questions as I'm working here, feel free to make Facebook comments here. I'm checking them from time to time and answering stuff. Let's see if anything new is going on with the comments. Dutcher's been chiming in. Great to have you listening, Dutcher. Yeah, Chris Newman pointing out that Jeff's playing his great Jeff Maley on the drums here. Man, I love working with Jeff. He's an incredible drummer and one of the funniest guys I've ever met. I feel like working with Jeff is basically just a big old feast of killer drum takes and cracking up. All kinds of things. Let's see. Yeah, it was a great team we had here on this basic tracking session. Andy Baker, of course, and John Austin on bass, and Jeff Maley on the drums. Man, just laying down the bones for a great album right there. Let's see, anybody else chiming in? Yeah, a bunch of people. Wow, nice to see so many people listening here. A lot of people saying they love it. That's great. If you have any questions, feel free to get specific or something, anything you want. Feel free to comment. I'll answer what I can. So glad to have you all here with me. This is really fun. So the pedal steel is what I was just working on. So given the composition of this mix, and when I say the composition of the mix, I mean kind of thinking about it spatially left to right, panning-wise. We have the drums, bass, acoustic guitar, 2 electrics that are panned, and then Andy's voice in the pedal steel. I would feel funny panning the pedal steel too far to one side or the other because given this layout, I wouldn't really have anything to put opposite it except the acoustic guitar. Keep in mind that I want to keep the electric guitars panned because they're doubles. They're kind of mirrors of each other. And I like those being left and right as a big sense of space. So that means, okay, what else am I going to pan? The drums and bass, I really feel like those should be central on this tune. Sure, sometimes you can pan drums and bass, especially when you're getting all trippy 60s style. I've done a lot of recordings I love that get really adventurous with that, but I don't feel like that's appropriate for this tune, so I want to keep those centered. So what does that leave me to pan? The acoustic guitar and the pedal steel. I feel funny putting the acoustic guitar too far to one side. That makes the mix feel unbalanced to me, and I really want that foundation of the acoustic strum of the tune kind of mostly centralized. But you'll see here what I'm doing with the acoustic guitar is I'm panning it in the middle but slightly tilted to the right. And then with the pedal steel, I'm putting that the acoustic guitar is slightly to the left. And then the pedal steel I'm putting slightly to the right. You could put the pedal steel right in the middle. That could be a very good choice here also. But I like the idea of putting it slightly off to keep out of the way of the vocal because Drew's going to have some riffs underneath the vocal. So let's give a listen from the top and see how things are sitting right now.
buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m.
Now, of course,
bar's about to close.
Drew is doing a great job of staying out of the way of the vocal here, which is awesome. So much of arrangement, or so much of mixing is made in the arrangement.
But she ain't seen
Listen
your
to how what he's
left
playing is
hand
always
ring.
out of the way of the vocal or complementing it in some
You got
way.
to
It's never
decide who you're
distracting.
gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
And like I said, so much of mixing is in the arrangement. If you have instruments that are competing with the vocal, it's going to be way harder to mix the vocal.
Oh, do your
In this
best
case,
to
everybody's
connect
giving it room. The vocal's sitting there so nice. The pedal steel is playing around, but never distracting.
3 a.m. The casino's open. Them neon lights are shining like a golden token. And you could hit the brakes or keep driving east.
Man, Drew and Andy are playing so well together here. A lot of the credit also goes to Andy because Andy did a lot of the editing to the pedal steel and choosing takes, and he did a beautiful job of that.
Oh, brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right when it's a harder road.
Cool. So I'm going to start to think now about mixing, doing some detail. I'm going to start to think about mixing after all this time. I'm going to start to think about some detail work with the vocal and the pedal steel. So I'm going to zoom in here and start to listen. And what I'm thinking about is little tiny volume things, making sure that stuff's out of each other's way nicely and that kind of thing. Like I said, they're doing that a lot themselves just musically, but we can push that a little bit farther here in the mix. So I'm going to just generally turn down the pedal steel just a touch. We'll be bringing it back up in some spots, but I'm going to start with my bass line down just a little bit. I just turned it down a dB or two, something small. I'm probably going to start by turning it back up the intro, but I wanted my bass line to be down just a touch. So let's give it a listen from the top. Yep, so we're going to want more of this intro riff here with the pedal steel for sure. I'm in clip gain. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. Let's hear it again from the top. Cool. So I feel like the second half of this, I guess I'll call it a solo, it's a little intro solo, is popping not quite as much as the first half. So I'm going to treat them a little bit separately, give it a little bit of more of a boost on the second half. Let's hear it again. That's nice. A little aside about the pedal steel, you might notice I'm not compressing the pedal steel at all. And pedal steel is something that is usually not a good thing to compress most of the time. There are no rules with audio, and maybe there are reasons to do it, but musicians that are working with volume pedals, such as pedal steel players are. So if you're not familiar with pedal steel, it's like a slide guitar that is laying flat. It looks like a table. It could be a table, and it's got different pedals that affect the pitch of the strings and allow you to do bends and stuff. And also there's a volume pedal, and the work of the volume pedal is essential to the playing of a pedal steel player. And so if you're compressing that, you are to some extent undoing some of their own natural playing. And if you have a pedal steel player who's maybe not as advanced or skilled, maybe you need to do that. Maybe you need to rein in that pedal work a little bit. But a pro like Drew, he's got that under control. pedal. And I don't want to mess with his dynamics. I want to let him do his volume pedal work just the way that he is without me messing with that. You'll see I'm making some volume adjustments, but in general, they're broader brushstroke volume adjustments. I'm not throwing a compressor on and undoing some of that volume pedal work of him. So let's hear it again from the top.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass.
So I'm listening now for little volume adjustments I want to do, especially with the pedal steel.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you just met.
So I'm happy with it so far. It's sitting kind of subtle behind the vocal.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring. And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
So that first pedal steel lick right there maybe just stepped on the vocal touch. I'm just going to take it down just a little bit.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring.
So trying to be subtle with my volume adjustments. I don't want to be, I want it to be natural and feel like a band is playing together. But, these subtle little things are the kind of things that can really move stuff out of the way for other things and that kind of thing. And, the element that I'm always thinking about is, at risk of sounding artsy or whatever, I think that a lot of the different artistic mediums all influence each other. And when I was younger, I took a lot of visual art classes and poetry and all kinds of stuff, and I was just trying to learn everything I could about all kinds of different mediums before I really settled on music and production, especially being my thing. And but I take things that I learned from that, and when I think back to my visual art classes, especially the painting classes I had, often we would talk about the way the eye follows a painting and the way that the artist can control kind of the path that your eye takes throughout a visual composition. And I think about that with music too. And in this case, I'm trying to do subtle little changes to keep the ear of the listener on that lead vocal in these spots. So in this case, I just took down that riff just a little bit because I felt like it was maybe just distracting a little bit right underneath that line.
The girl that you just met wants to take you home. She ain't seen your left hand with the ring.
Still sounds natural, the line after it. I didn't take it down too much.
You got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing.
So that whole chorus, I'm real happy with that. Yeah, Drew's a little bit hotter there at the very top of the chorus, but I like that. It gives it a little push into the chorus that I think is cool because it's a heavy change in the tune, and I like that emphasis. I remember an engineer I assisted many years ago was talking about he was having a conversation with another engineer who was complaining about having to edit drums. And he's like, man, I feel like every drummer I work with sounds like they're excited to get to the chorus, and I got to kind of, edit them so that it doesn't sound like they're so excited to be there. And my buddy's response was, man, I've been working my whole life to try to make the drummer sound like they're excited to get to the chorus. You're supposed to be excited to get to the chorus. And I feel the same way. I like it popping there a little bit, but he kind of settles back down under the rest of the chorus a little bit, which is nice. And then let's hear this post-chorus and then this kind of riffage coming up here.
Your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. It's not far off, but I'm going to give it just a subtle boost. I don't want it to all of a sudden sound like a pedal steel solo, everybody, but I just want to give it a little something. Just, for one thing, I think about the volume of the vocal and where that is. And when that leaves and there's something instrumentally going on, a solo or a melody line of some sort, I want that to then take over the attention of the listener. So a lot of times I'm thinking about solos and riffs kind of popping out a little bit in those spots where the vocal isn't, to kind of fill that same attention space or volume space a little bit.
When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. 3 a.m.
Cool. I think that's working great. It does step a little bit over the end of Andy's line. You see Andy's line is getting quieter down here, but I'm going to come back and do some detail work to Andy's volume there, and I think I'm going to be boosting up the end of that line just a little bit. Quite common thing to do when someone's, doing a vocal run that is going down in pitch. Sometimes you need to boost the end of it a little bit to keep it, even. But anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm going to come back to it. Let's go to the next verse, pick it up where the pedal steel comes back in here.
Brown lights are shining like a golden token, and you could hit the brakes or keep driving east, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star, hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
So, the first chorus, I was just talking about how Drew kind of had a little bit more prominent of a riff there at the first chorus. This one doesn't have that volume-wise, so I'm going to create one a little bit and just boost his riff just a touch. Want to be subtle, don't want it to sound like all of a sudden someone turned up the fader on Drew, but just a little something to make it sound like we're digging in more into that chorus.
So hold steady to your northern star, hold brave enough to show 'em who.
I'm going to play it one more time.
So hold steady to your northern star.
I'm going to give it just a little bit more of a boost. I want to be careful. I don't want it to sound unnatural. And also the riff that Drew's playing here is not a big barn burner. Hey, welcome to the chorus riff. It's a little subtler than that. So I don't, boosting it up too much is going to sound artificial. But just a little something subtle just to give it that oomph into the chorus.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star.
Yeah, I like that. Keep it rolling.
Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right.
All right, well, let's bring up this riff going into the bridge here. This is almost a solo from the pedal steel.
Right thing. Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right.
Sweet. There's this one little spot in here where it gets a little quiet in the middle of this riff. I'm going to bring this up a little bit. So much of mixing is about this little tiny detail volume work. And this is the stuff that, can really make the difference in the end, these tiny little things. John Campos, who was listening earlier, a great friend of mine and my audio teacher when I was in college, and still my audio teacher in many ways, has told me so many valuable things. If you ever get a chance to take his classes at Western, I can't recommend them enough. And one thing that he mentioned was about tiny little volume differences. And I remember him doing a visualization example where it's like if someone has a 2x4 and holds it in front of you and then puts another 2x4 there that is 1/8 of an inch taller and they're side by side, you're going to clearly know which one is taller. Whereas if you view them separately, one at a time, someone puts a 2x4 that's 4 feet long and then throws it away and then puts another 2x4 in front of you that's 4 feet long and 1/8 of an inch, they're going to look the same to you. But you put them next to each other and one is clearly taller than the other one. And I think the same thing, that's what he was talking about, was about volume changes. And I think about that all the time when I'm messing with this stuff. A little tiny volume change can really make an effect on a mix. And if you're mixing a tune, chances are you're doing these tiny little changes all the time. So let's just bring up these couple of notes in his riff here a little bit.
And you know it's right when it's a harder road. get to decide which way to go.
Cool. This is an aside, not about the pedal steel, but now that I've EQ'd those electric guitars, I kind of want to hear just a little bit more of them, and I'm going to take a second and just turn them up right now, because I think that's going to influence some other things here. So let's see here. How much? Let's try maybe just a dB here up on these guys, these two hard panned electrics. We'll bring them up to about here. All right, and then let's hear it again going into this bridge.
And you know it's right when it's a harder road, and you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside.
Yep, I like that electric guitar change. And then here comes Will's guitar solo. I love that solo. It's so nice. Nice job, Will. I'm going to start. It needs a little EQ, though, I think. I'm going to start by bringing over that same EQ. In Pro Tools, if you hold down Option, you can drag plugins and copy and paste them over to other tracks. My guess is for a starter, this solo is going to need something kind of similar. So let's start here. I'm in the wrong spot. Here we go.
You get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be.
Yeah. I like dipping out that mid-range. I'm going to give it a little bit of a low mid boost also, just fatten it up a little bit. Bring up that shimmer up top just a little bit more. Cool. So let's check out this EQ I'm doing here. I figured it was going to need something similar because I think it was the same guitar recorded in the same way and that kind of thing. But I'm going a little bit further with it. It's sitting in a different place in the mix, so it needs something different than those rhythm guitars. It's really prominent. It's in your face. It's it's a feature of the tune, and so that's a different role than a doubled and panned, more textural thing, right? So let's hear what I'm doing here to this solo. We'll bypass that EQ, then put it back on. Yeah. So it's sounding rounder to me, but also the high end is making it pop a little bit more. It doesn't sound too dark or muffled to me. I really like what that's doing. Then let's keep moving here and hear what. Let's go back to thinking about the pedal steel riffage after this solo. I want to solo this and hear exactly what Drew's doing here. Hear it back in the mix now. Yeah, so we'll want to bring that up, I believe. I'm not sure about that high note at the end. Maybe that doesn't need to come back up. Let's try it. Is that Will doing some harmonics on the end of his solo? I want to make sure we're staying out of the way of that. So I'm going to solo up the end of the guitar solo here. Nice. Sweet. So I want to make sure we're not covering up too much of those harmonics, but I think those could come up anyway. So you're hearing some stuff in here as I'm soloing some of these tracks. There's a little click in the pedal steel from some kind of edit or something. There's a little buzz in the electric guitar. And sometimes I'll clean up this stuff for sure, but you gotta remember to not be too zoomed in on this stuff. My buddy Jay Jackson, who's taught a really awesome hip hop production and mixing workshop here. In his workshop, he put it the way he phrased it was thinking micro and thinking macro. It's really important to be able to switch between the two. And a lot of times, if there's a weird little thing when something's soloed but you don't hear it in the mix, who cares? You don't need to spend time cleaning up stuff that is never going to matter in the mix anyway. So stuff like the amp buzz, there might be other spots where I do hear the amp buzz. In this spot, so far, I don't hear it. Maybe that'll change when I raise this up. But I'm not going to worry about that if it's not coming through the mix. And same thing with the little click in the pedal steel. Let's hear it one more time here. That's great. But now that I'm hearing what Will's doing there, I realize I feel like I'm bringing up Drew maybe too much. Maybe overall, maybe I just need to bring this riff back. Let's put it back to where it was and listen, because Drew should be subtler than Will here. Will's not done. He's still got something to say here, so let's make sure he's got some space to say that.
3 a.m.
Yeah, that's working great.
and the
I'm
baby's
going to keep it
crying.
rolling.
Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying. But you ain't never loved like this before. And in her eyes you see what you're fighting for. So hold steady to your northern star.
Cool. Gonna give Drew another little boost here going into the chorus.
So hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show her who you are. Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, so hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show her who you are.
I'm going to bring up the pedal steel throughout this whole chorus just a little bit. I really want this last chorus to really kind of be all in, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of times, a tune like this, the last chorus, you really want it to be everybody digging in and bringing it home kind of thing. A lot of times you do that through subtle little mixing stuff. Obviously, the performers have to play that way, but you can emphasize and de-emphasize certain things just with little volume adjustments in the mix. So let's bump up that pedal steel just a touch and hear what it sounds like if Drew's just digging in just a little bit more on this last chorus.
Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, so hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show who you are. Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool, I think that's working well. And then maybe a little extra boost on this outro also. Play it again going into that outro.
Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Great. I feel really good about all that. I think it's working well. So, next up is going to be thinking about the vocal and maybe doing some detail work on that vocal. I'm just going to play it again from the top and just listen for a minute here. 3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close.
that you just met wants to take you home, but she ain't seen your left hand with the ring. And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Cool. So listening to this fresh, I want to take down that slapback delay that I added earlier. I'm hearing it a little bit more than I want to right now. I want it barely there. The reverb, if you're just joining us, is part of the audio file that Andy sent me, so that's in there. I think it sounds great, but that's why I'm not messing with the reverb on the vocal. That's kind of baked into it. Also, if you're just joining us, a reminder that at La Luna, me and Sam Peters, one of the other engineers here, did a workshop last week. Instead of asking for admission fees for our workshops, we're putting them online streaming for free, and we're asking if you're able to give a donation to the Michigan Music Alliance's Artist Relief Fund. It's a great organization helping out a lot of people in terrible need right now. Almost every musician I know has had their calendar basically just erased by the COVID-19 crisis, and they are out of work and struggling. Most musicians I know are barely getting by in the best of times, and so this has just been catastrophic to so many in our arts community, and of course so many people of all professions and kinds. But the Michigan Music Alliance is raising money for the Artist Relief Fund, which is a fund that musicians can apply to get some compensation for some of their lost gigs and help them get through this super tough time, because people don't have gigs right now, and most people I know don't know when they're going to. It could be months until people are back to gigging right now. Hopefully not that long, but who knows. So check out the links in the Facebook post in the description here, and give if you're able, and if not, no problem. Happy to have you anyway, and hope you're learning something. If you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to put it down in the comments here on Facebook. Let me take a look here and see if there's anything new to address. Oh, Andy Baker joined. So Andy is now watching a stream of me mixing his tune live online. So hey, Andy, how you doing? Thanks for the killer tune for us to work on. Let's see. Andrew Rogers chimed in. Hey, thanks. That's great. Nice that you were listening. Nice that you're joining us. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the Facebook comments, and I'll address them as soon as I can. So now I'm going to dig into a little vocal volume detail work. We are doing some compression to the vocal. It's sitting in a general spot that I'm real happy with in the mix, but lead vocals in the mixing stage are often about the little details. So let's give a listen and start to think about that. The compressors are doing a lot of work for us, but there's a little bit more that we probably want to do on top of that. Let's check it out. Oh, Bruce Lang asks about vocal EQ. Yes. So Bruce, right now I'm doing some pretty subtle stuff to the vocal, relatively speaking. I'll show you here what we got going on. So at the beginning here, so Andy's vocal already sounded good right off the bat. He recorded this, I believe, with one of his Neumann 103s, which is a really beautiful microphone. I love Neumanns. Yet to meet a Neumann that I don't like for many different applications. So he started with good ingredients right off the bat. And I'm doing a little massaging to the sound on top of that. I'll turn off the EQ. Let's hear it just flat. This is no EQ, but we're still hearing the compression. We're still hearing the reverb that's on there, of course, and a little bit of slapback, but no EQ.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
So it sounds great to me already.
Diploma cap and gown coupled on the floor.
Just maybe a little dark. So this EQ that I'm doing a low cut here around 75 hertz, which is way out of the way of the vocal. It's just getting rid of any kind of rumble and that kind of stuff. You know, it's certainly not taking out any warmth from there. Then I'm doing a very tiny dip at about 200 hertz in this case. You'll see minus 0.8 dB. I mean, it's barely anything, but there's a little bit of boominess down there that I wanted to clear up, but I wanted to be careful not to get rid of the warmth in his voice. I love that warmth in here. And so I'm doing a very subtle cut there, adding a little, let's see, about 3.6K, trying to get a little bit of presence in there. And once again, a small change, 1.2 dB. And then a little high-end sparkle up there, about, it's a high shelf. about 13K, so way up there. But just a little something to make the vocal pop a little bit more, help with intelligibility a little bit. So I'll pop this EQ in and out. We'll start with the EQ off.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
Now the EQ on.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
It's a subtle difference. Back off.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Just a little bit more muffled of a sound, and then back on.
You got to decide who you're gonna be.
So what that EQ is doing is that it's adding a little bit of presence to the voice to me, and it's making it pop out of the mix just a little bit more. I feel like if I was going with that darker sound, I would have to raise up the vocal a little bit. And in this case, this one is allowing me, this sound is allowing it to sit in the mix in a way that pops through just a little bit more to me. It's a little bit more out of the way of some of the other rhythm instruments, that kind of thing. Once again, super subtle changes here, but those add up. Let's and it also depends on the kind of song. This song is a little bit more anthemic. Like, it's a little bit louder in the way of Acoustic Roots tunes. It's rocking a little bit more. It's got electric guitars in it. The snare's really hitting. I want the vocal to sound like Andy's singing out a little bit, and I'm not necessarily through a PA, but the picture in my head is of the whole band playing this with his voice kind of on top of everybody, and really kind of pushing it a little bit. I want to bring up that high end to bring out a little bit more of that texture in the top of his voice. If this was a super mellow ballad with just finger-picked acoustic guitar and singing something real quiet and intimate, maybe I'd be going for a warmer, darker vocal sound and trying to make it sound a little bit more like he was sitting right next to you. But this, I want it to sound like he's kind of over the band a little bit. So these changes are kind of bringing me to that place in my head a little bit more.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap.
Let's see, Bruce just wrote again. He said, can you do that comparative EQ and not soloed? Cool. I thought I didn't do it soloed, or maybe he's asked me to do it soloed. I don't know, but here it is, not soloed. We'll start with the EQ off.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
And then the same line again with the EQ on.
3 a.m. and you're driving.
Oh, he said soloed. Okay, cool. See, look at how this works. You ask me questions and I will respond. It's so great to have you here with us, Bruce, us, me, and all the other people listening. Let's see. Okay, here it is soloed. So EQ off. And keep in mind there is reverb on this track, so you're hearing that even when it's soloed.
3 a.m. and you're driving home.
And then EQ on.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
Back off.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Back on.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
So it's subtle. I'm not trying to change the sound of his voice dramatically, but when the EQ is on, I feel like I'm hearing a little bit more of the presence up top. I feel like it's a little bit clearer to me. There's a little bit more articulation in there, and it sounds like he's pushing just a little bit harder in a way that I like. Here's one more time. I'll go to a chorus maybe. Maybe it'll be helpful to change up the spot. Here's a chorus soloed with the EQ off. I'm sure Andy's loving us soloing his vocal to the world, but I love the sound of his voice. I think if you just put out an album with his voice soloed, people would love it too. Here's the voice, no EQ.
You got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star.
Then EQ on.
Oh, brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve.
EQ off.
Oh, do your best to do the next.
So, I think it sounds great either way. If we didn't EQ the voice, I think that would still work great on the album. And maybe you might even prefer the warmer, darker vocal sound. This is one of the creative choices we make when we're mixing. For me, I like how it's sitting over the band with the EQ a little bit better. If the arrangement was different and the song was mellower or slower or something, maybe I'd do something different. But in this case, I think it's working really nice. But all of these decisions are the kind of things, this is how you put yourself and your own tastes into the work that you're doing. And there's no right and wrong answer a lot of the time. Let's hear it with the full band again. I'll go back to the chorus here with the EQ on.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star.
EQ off.
Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve,
Then EQ on.
oh, do your best to do the next right thing.
Yeah, great. So I think that's working nice. So I'm going to go back to the top of the tune and start to think about some volume adjustments here with the voice, and probably little tiny detail stuff, but let's see what it needs.
3 a.m. and you're driving home. Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
Cool. So this is a great example of a spot where I want to do a little boost to this crumpled on the floor line. Like I said before, it's real common when singers are singing when they go down in pitch for them to get a little bit quieter. And, you want to honor the naturalness of that. I don't want to just flatline his vocal. His own dynamics and his performance are part of the character and soul of this tune. I certainly don't want to undo all that. But I also want, especially the lyrics, to be really present and kind of the center of attention for a lot of this. So in this case, I'm going to try giving just a subtle little boost here. What I do, about a 1.3 dB or so boost to this line. Let's hear what this does here to crumpled on the floor.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
Yep. Maybe up just one more touch. I want to be careful. I don't want to sound unnatural.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
That might have been a little too much. I'm going to undo that.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
Cool. And I'm going to give it an even added boost just on the word floor, just a little bit, so that really comes through.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
That was too much again. I'm doing tiny adjustments here. But it's funny, especially with a lead vocal that's really prominent in a mix, a dB can make a huge difference in a mix. These adjustments I'm doing are all a dB and a half, 2 dB, like in that range, and a lot smaller than that. Let's see here, 1.3 boost and then a 1.8 boost. So tiny adjustments, but man, does it make an effect on something real loud. If I was making 1 dB boost to, the rhythm guitar or something that's deeper in the mix, you probably wouldn't notice it as much as something like a lead vocal here.
Diploma cap and gown crumpled on the floor.
Cool, I'll keep it rolling.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Cool. So you can even see here that Beam is a little bit quieter. So I'm going to roll that up just a little bit in volume. But, sometimes things look quieter, but they pop out of the mix more. So just because something looks quieter doesn't mean it needs to be adjusted. In this case, we can see that it clearly does. And on top of that, I might give a little added boost to the M at the word beam. Because honestly, I didn't know. I thought it was beer this whole time until I sold the vocal and heard it was beam. So in interest of lyrics, I might give that a little extra push here. But let's listen what just bumping up the whole word sounds like first.
Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer.
Cool, that's working better, but I'm going to give just a little extra boost to the M there at the end.
Bottle of beer.
It's hard to do too much without it sounding unnatural. So, I'm not looking for it to get super clear, because if I made it really loud and obvious, it would sound really unnatural. But a little boost might help here.
Pass you a bottle of beer.
Cool, I'll take that for now.
You got to decide who you're gonna be.
And then same thing on who you gotta be. So yeah, this little volume work, this can make all the difference. Yes, I'm using compression. I'm using a couple passes of compression on here, but of subtle compression. But I don't want to rely on the compressor to be doing all the work for me, because if that's the case, I would have to be squashing the vocal if I wanted the compressor to be taking care of all of this tiny detail work. The compressor is taking care of a lot, and it's getting me much closer. But I want to manually give these little volume automation boosts here to get me the last bit of the way. Because if I over compress the vocal, it's not going to sound natural. It's going to sound flat and doesn't have the dynamic and life that I want to have. So I'm doing a combination of compression with these volume adjustments.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be.
Nice.
3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
Cool. I'm going to do the same thing, just subtle little boost on bars about to close. I mean, this is like a dB, less than a dB. Tiny little adjustments.
3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you just met wants to take you home.
Cool. I'm going to give a little extra boost to wants to take you home. Tiny, fraction of a dB.
The girl that you just met wants to take you home. But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring. And you got to decide who you
I'm
can.
going to do the same thing with a left hand with the ring, or with the ring, whatever that end is there.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring.
Maybe just a little bit more. That's an important line to make sure it's clear. There's a ring involved here, folks.
But she ain't seen your left hand with the ring.
Great.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star.
Great. So this big B in here, I want to massage that just a little bit because it gets a little, maybe pokes out of the mix a little bit too much at the end of it. We want to poke out some because it's a dramatic part in the tune, but you know, let's give it one more listen here.
Decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's good where it's at, but I'm going to try just doing a subtle little. So it's hard to tell here with the colors, but instead of just like grabbing this word and turning the whole thing down like I have in other spots, I'm doing a very slight decrescendo, if you will, across this word. So it's still raising in volume, but reaching a slight less of a peak when it gets up there.
Decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to
I like that. That's still building into the chorus, but it's taking a little bit of the edge off of it.
gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
All right, a little more volume work here at the chorus.
So hold steady to your northern star.
Doesn't need much. Sounds pretty good. I just want to try turning these words up just a hair.
So hold steady to your northern star.
Great.
Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Most of
Enough to show 'em who
this line could go up a little bit, and you'll see there's a pattern here. When Andy goes lower in his range, it gets a little bit quieter. That's natural. It happens to all of us.
Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Cool. I'm even going to give it just a little extra boost with a subtle push up here towards the end of the line.
Enough to show 'em who you are.
Great.
When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. So this last line is the hook of the song. The song is called Next Right Thing. So I want to make sure that this is real clear. This is kind of the point of the tune, right? This is the refrain.
Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. So that whole second line can still come up a little bit, and then I might do another little tapering kind of thing. I guess anti-tapering. I don't know, whatever that. What's the opposite of tapering? I don't know. To boost up the end of the lines just a little bit more.
Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Great. Maybe just a little bit more here. And we also want to watch out because the pedal steel is coming in over this riff. And so I want to think about, is it just a matter of boosting up the vocal, or is maybe part of the answer to turn down the pedal steel right there too? Let's listen.
Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of the edge off the beginning of that pedal steel riff just to keep it out of the way of the hook of the vocal. Subtle. I don't want it to disappear, but I just want it to sit back just a touch under the vocal.
Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Yes, that's sounding better to me. And Tom Dieter says ramping. That's the opposite of whatever the other word I was saying is. I don't know. I'm not a word guy. That's why I'm in music.
Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. I'm just going to give one more little extra push to the end of this line here because it's the hook. And once again, I'm trying to be subtle.
Your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Great. Cool. Let's go to the next verse.
3 a.m. The casino's open.
You know, I've heard it pointed out that recording studios are a lot like casinos in that there are no windows, no clocks, and I don't know. Back in the day, they would be full of cigarette smoke, but you don't find too many studios like that anymore, thankfully.
3 a.m. The casino's open.
Okay, so I went a little too far. That sounds a little unnatural. Maybe I'm going to peel that back and then maybe do that ramp up, as Tom suggests, towards the end of the line here.
3 a.m. The casino's open.
Great. The pen of open is getting lost just a little bit, so I'm going to bring that up a little bit too.
The casino's open.
Great. Although it's bringing out some kind of extraneous noise here in the voice a little bit. Maybe that's the reverb, or maybe there's like a breath after it.
Casino's open.
A little bit of a breath. So I'm going to end my volume boost pretty close to the end of the word, and then maybe even... See, in Pro Tools, you can do different clip gain volumes for different clips and then fade between them. This is not an edit. It looks like an edit, but it's different volume adjustments. And when you fade between two different clip gain volume adjustments, it kind of creates a little fade from one level to the next. So I'm just trying to make sure that the pen that I'm raising up here doesn't sound unnatural.
3 a.m.
Put it back in the mix, because who cares what it sounds like soloed?
3 a.m. The casino's open.
That'll work.
Them neon lights are shining like
Nah, I'm lying to myself. I don't like that. I'm not happy yet. I'm still hearing that breath kind of at the sound of open, so maybe I'm gonna try to ease that transition just a little bit more.
the casino's open.
That'll work.
Them neon lights are shining like a golden token.
And golden token we're gonna bring up a little bit as well.
Them neon lights are shining like a golden token. And you could hit the brakes or keep driving east.
Gonna bring up this part here a little bit.
And you could hit the brakes or keep driving east.
Yep, and a little emphasis on driving east, just a little bit here. Oops, not the beginning of the line though.
So keep driving east.
Great.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold.
Cool. I'm gonna do the same kind of tapering off of this B here a little bit like I did the last one, where it's still raising, getting louder, but I'm just taking the edge off it just a little bit.
And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Cool. That second line I want to make sure is coming through nicely. Maybe try a little ramp up here.
Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are.
Just a little bit more.
Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing.
And then same thing here on, we're probably going to run into a similar thing at the end of this course as we did the first one, where we're going to want to bring up the the next right thing here a little bit more. Let's see.
Oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. Probably bring up the ends of those lines just a little bit more on top of it.
Best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool.
And you know it's right when it's a harder road. And you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be.
Cool. I'm going to bring up the first part of this bridge just a touch. I feel like it needs just a little bit more of a push going into the bridge here, but the second half I thought was pretty good.
And you know it's right when it's a harder road. And you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be.
Sweet. I think that's working nice. So another thing I'm going to do in this bridge is, remember we have that very subtle slapback echo going on in the voice, barely there. I'm going to bump that up just a touch in this bridge. When you are doing effects on vocals, it is real common to have effects change throughout a tune, or even just changing their amount throughout a tune. But a real common thing is when people use slapbacks, sometimes they're not on in the verses and they're on just a little bit in the choruses, that kind of thing. Or maybe they're on all the time and they're a little bit louder in certain parts. Once again, going for subtle. You know, you don't want to sound like someone just hit the effect button, usually. Sometimes you do. But in this case, I'm just trying to make this bridge just pop just a little bit more. And that slapback, what that does is, even if you can't pinpoint it exactly when you're listening to the song, it's a reflection and kind of makes it, I mean that not in a mirror sense, but I mean in an audio sense. It makes it sound like something's bouncing around just a slight bit. And so it can make something feel like it's a little bit louder because you're hearing it reflect, you're hearing it bounce just a little bit. So once again, trying to be very careful not make this sound too effecty, but I wonder what just a little boost in the bridge sounds like.
Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right when it's a harder road.
Yep, and just to show people, if you're just joining us and you didn't hear me solo and mess with the slapback earlier, here it is cranked quite a bit more, if you want to hear the effect that I'm blending in there.
And you know it's right when it's a harder road. And you get to decide which way to go.
So there's a reverb that's already on Andy's voice, but then the delay on top of it, creating just a little, we call it a slapback. It's a one-time delay that happens real quick. Kakak. That kind of thing. Kakak. So I'm adding just a little touch of it to Andy's voice throughout the tune, just to give it a little shadow behind it, a little three-dimensionality, and then I'm boosting it up just a hair more in this bridge.
Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right when it's a harder road.
Maybe I'll go one step further with it.
And you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be.
Great. I think that's working awesome. And remember when I was talking earlier about how when instrumental parts come in, this guitar solo is a great example of this. When the vocal leaves and another melodic instrument comes in its place, I kind of want it to be attracting the same amount of attention as the vocal that is gone. So in other words, I kind of think of that guitar solo. I'm going to clean up a little bit of that riff raff before it comes in there. It looks like just amp noise. when the guitar solo comes in, I want it to kind of take the place in the mix of the vocal, volume-wise, panning-wise. In this case, it's coming up in the middle, and it's doing that to me right now. I'm going to play it again and hear that transition into the guitar solo. I kind of want the guitar solo to be volume-wise in the same kind of spot as the vocal. It doesn't have to be exact, but I want it to fill that space.
And you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be.
So I think that's working great. The guitar comes in a little bit loud over the end of Andy's last chord, last word there. And you saw earlier with the pedal steel, I kind of snuck it under a little bit. But in this case, I like the guitar solo coming in kind of hard like that. It's got a great energy to me, and I think it's okay if it pops out over the vocal a little bit. Let's hear that transition one more time.
It's the man inside that you decide to be.
Yeah, I love that. That's got great energy. So I want to keep that. Cool. Let's go to the last verse.
3 a.m. and the baby's crying. Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying. But you ain't never loved like this before. In her eyes you see what you're fighting for. So hold steady to your northern star.
Great. I think that's working really nice. I'm going to give it one more listen to see if there's any detail work that needs to happen here.
3 a.m. and the baby's crying. Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying.
So I think because this verse is quieter, that the quieter stuff is working better, and I don't know if I need to raise it up as much. Let's give one more listen here to the top of the verse.
3 a.m. and the baby's crying.
Maybe just a touch. It doesn't need much. There's more space for it here because the whole band is kind of laying back.
3 a.m. and the baby's crying. Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying. You ain't never.
Cool. That first line I was happy with. The second one, I need to just do something a little subtly different. I think I'm going to bring up this word here just a touch. And then Diane maybe popped just a little too much. So let's bring that back just a little bit.
Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying. But you ain't never loved like this before. In her eyes you see what you're fighting for. So hold steady.
Cool. This spot, which on earlier courses we did a little tapering of the raise on this line right here. I don't think this one needs it. I think I'm going to leave it alone.
See what you're fighting for. So hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave.
Great. A little mouth noise in here I want to clean up, and there's different ways to do that here when you got a vocal. Let's just solo it real quick.
Oh, brave.
So we could just go and delete this spot, and a lot of times that works, but I've got a program that I use a lot called iZotope RX, and I love iZotope. It allows me to do all kinds of really complicated things easily and quickly, and getting out mouse sounds is something that it's super good at. The reason I'm doing it this way is because there's a little bit of reverb tail there, so I don't want to just chop this out. I'd rather remove the click without just muting the vocal in that spot. So let's bring up iZotope RX. iZotope is a separate program, and it can operate just on its own, but it can also be partnered up with Pro Tools, and you can fly back and forth between the two. And in here, you'll see here's, well, there's not really much to see. There's a little space between words, but you can see these clicks, these vertical lines here. And let's see. And I've got a declicker tool. iZotope works kind of similarly to Photoshop in a way, in that you can use visual references and you can kind of erase things partially or entirely, that kind of thing. You can do all kinds of stuff. Clicks are real easy to see, just big old vertical lines. And so I don't even probably need to listen to that. I'm just going to apply that.
Then start.
Unsolo it.
Then start. Oh, brave enough
Great.
to show her who you are.
Another one right there. We'll get this guy too. Just taking care of those little clicks. This is the kind of thing that, once again, you got to think about micro and macro with, as my friend Jay says. By the way, if you don't know Jay Jackson, fantastic engineer in Kalamazoo, part of the Last Gasp Collective. And when he did a workshop here, he was talking about micro and macro and thinking, switching your brain between the two. And it's such a great way to put it. And, you know, if there's little noises and stuff in a vocal that you can't hear in the mix, who cares? Don't spend your time soloing a vocal and taking every noise out of it. Listen to it in the mix. And if the noise isn't coming through and bothering you, who cares? Keep moving. But in this case, I was hearing it.
Oh, brave enough to show her who you are. Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, so hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show her who you are.
Great. So I'm going to bump up this whole last chorus just a touch on the vocal. Remember I was saying earlier when I was messing with the pedal steel volume that I kind of want to sound like everybody's digging in on this last chorus and really bringing it home. And I'm going to do that subtly with the vocal here overall, and then I might do some more detail work in there too.
Lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, so hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show her who you are.
Great. I'm going to get this show her who you are line here. Subtle little volume adjustments here to make sure those words are really popping and things sound real consistent.
Oh, brave enough to show her who you are.
Great.
Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Cool. Going to bring up these last two lines a little bit more on top.
Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Remember, this line is the hook of the tune, so I'm not saying it needs to be louder than everything else, but I certainly don't want it to disappear.
Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing.
Great. That sounded really good to me. So now's maybe a good time to talk about kind of some overall mix philosophy of mine, which is I'm a big fan of fresh ears. And anybody that works with me knows that I talk about that a lot. While I'm saying this, I'm just clearing up some dead space in some of these files that we don't need in there. I'm a big fan of fresh ears. I think that you can lose perspective very easily when you're working on something over and over again. And leaving it and coming back to it fresh later can be so helpful. And excuse me. And a lot of times can save you a lot of time and money in the long run. If I'm working on a tune and I spend a couple hours on it and then I leave it and come back, I can get, I can hear it fresh. I can then spend another half hour on it or something later and get it much farther along than if I had kept working on it for 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever. I think leaving stuff and coming back to it and having that perspective, listening to it outside of the studio, that kind of thing, hearing it on different systems is so important because every system sounds different. Or just setting it down for a minute, coming back, moving on to another tune, coming back to it fresh later, that kind of stuff is so important. So when I mix, I'm not necessarily thinking like, this is it. This has got to be the final perfect mix that is going off to mastering right now. I'm thinking of it as this is a first pass, and maybe I'll come through and do a second pass later. Maybe there are things that I'm not hearing now that I'll hear fresh later. Maybe there are changes that I'm making now that aren't the right thing, and I hear them later and go, oh, I whatever, I should undo that EQ that I did, or that volume adjustment I did is kind of obvious now, or I need to go further with it, or whatever. The problem is that as my good friend John Campos says, the problem with our ears is that they are connected to our brains, and our brains tend to be able to focus on certain things, which is both a great thing and can be problematic. When you're working on a mix, I can't tell you how many times I'm working on a mix and then all of a sudden focus on one element of the mix and it's all I can hear. And a minute ago it was fine, but now I'm focusing on it and it sounds way out of whack to me. And so, a lot of that isn't that anything changed in the mix or that I'm hearing something I didn't before. It's that I'm focusing on it. And you got to zoom out. You got to think about the big picture, and a lot of times I'd like to set stuff down and come back to it fresh later, and those answers will reveal themselves much quicker when I hear it fresh than they will after I've been working on a song for hours. So the reason I'm saying this is I'm getting ready to print this mix for the day. I'm feeling really good about how it's sounding. Is it done? I don't know. Probably not. I probably want to do another pass, do some more tweaks to it. But this might be a real good point to print what I've got, send it to Andy, see what he thinks, see, what the direction, if it's the right direction or what. And this is also a good time to review against how far, hopefully, I've improved things from the rough mix. So remember earlier, if you've been with me this whole time, I talked about how my main mix path I send through bus 29 and 30 instead of the main mix. Why bus 29 and 30? Well, the exact bus is totally arbitrary. It doesn't matter which one you use. But instead of just having all of my tracks going to my left-right mix and then doing a bounce to disc and Pro Tools at the end, like most people are used to doing, I go to a new track, and I've got a track here called Master, my Master Fader. On the way, I go through some other stuff that I don't need to get into right now, but some other opportunities to put on plugins on the whole mix if I want to and that kind of thing. Right now, I'm not. Sometimes I'll put on some compression and EQ. In this case, I'm not, and I don't know if this one needs it. We'll see. But at any rate, I print the mix to a new track, and you can see that here. Here's our last rough mix from March 17th. And so the cool thing about doing this, there's a whole bunch of reasons that I do it this way. It would probably take me way too long to get into now. But one of the great things is because the whole mix is getting routed to this track here, this master track, I can easily, with one button, listen back to the previous mix. I can switch between the previous mix, in which case the rough mix, and my live mix. And I'm doing that here with this input button. When this is off, it is playing back the audio file that is on this track. And when I put it into input mode, oh, hold on. Little Pro Tools feedback there online for everybody. Moving too fast in my shortcuts. When I put this track into input mode, then I'm hearing the live mix going to it. So with one button, I can switch this between input and auto or playback, whatever you call it, and I can compare my old mix with the new one. This is great for me in so many ways. For one thing, in this case with a rough mix, I can switch back and go, is there anything that was cool in the rough mix that I've undone? Is there anything that was better there that I want to get back? Or is things moving in the right direction? This also allows me in the mixing process when I'm doing revisions with an artist, they send me a note saying, whatever, take the vocal down a touch or something, and this will allow me to flip back and forth between the old mix and where I'm at now if I want to reference it and go, am I honoring their notes? Do I think I'm doing what they want? Just being able to compare and that kind of thing. So I'm going to switch back to the rough mix, and then I'm going to switch live here between the rough and the today's mix. Hopefully it's an improvement. We'll see. Here's the rough mix. Then switching to the live mix now. Rough mix.
Diploma cap and gown, coupled on the floor. Your buddies in back
live mix.
Pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be.
Back to the rough now.
3 a.m. Bars about that you just met
Live
wants to
mix.
take you home.
Cool. Great. I feel really good about it. It's a subtle difference, but like I said at the beginning of this, I was already really happy with what this song sounds like. There's a lot of little detail stuff I'm hearing. I like how the drums are hitting harder now. The kick and bass sound like they're locked better to me. The snare's hitting harder. The voice sounds more present and even. The pedal steel is more set in place. It's carved some space away from the vocal, that kind of thing. There's some things that sound pretty similar. I did some subtle changes to the guitar tones and that kind of thing, but those aren't big differences. They sound a little smoother to me now, but this is great. Sometimes I'll do this A/B test here with the old mix and go, oh man, there's, whatever, the kick sounded better on the rough or something. And the great thing about working in Pro Tools is you can always get back your settings from an old session if you think ahead and you do save as's all the time. Every time I open up a song and work on it, I do a save as with that day's date on it. So if I want to revert something, any element of the mix, any sound, any plugin, anything I want to the previous version, I always got those settings saved. I can always bring them in real easy. If I send this to Andy and he sends it back to me and goes, I like the way whatever fills in the blank sounded better on the previous version, I can always get back there. And that's so helpful because most of the time, hopefully you're moving in the right direction on things, but sometimes you look back at where you came from and you go, oh, there's something that was better before, and I took it in a direction that's not as good. So anyway, I feel good about where this is sitting. I think I'm going to close this down for today. It looks like we're about at the 3-hour mark, so that seems like good timing. I want to thank everybody who spent some time with me today. This has been really fun. I hope to do more of these, and a week from tonight, whatever that is, April, I don't have my date in front of me, but next Tuesday evening at 7 p.m., I'm going to do a live mastering workshop the same way, streaming online. So feel free to join me for that a week from tonight. And if you're able and are sympathetic to the plights of so many out-of-work musicians right now, please consider donating to the Michigan Music Alliance's Artist Relief Fund. There are links here on the Facebook page, so you can check that out. So thank you so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Cap and gown crumpled on the floor. Your buddies in back pass you a bottle of beer, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. 3 a.m. bar's about to close. The girl that you just met wants to take you home. She ain't seen your left hand with the ring, and you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation's pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. The casino's open. Them neon lights are shining like a golden token. And you could hit the brakes or keep driving east. And you got to decide who you're gonna be. So hold steady to your northern star. Hold brave enough to show 'em who you are. When temptation pulling at your sleeve, oh, do your best to do the next right thing. Oh, the next right thing. And you know it's right when it's a harder road, and you get to decide which way to go. But the one thing in your life you get to keep is the man inside that you decide to be. 3 a.m. and the baby's crying. Well, she's been up all night and you feel like dying. But you ain't never loved like this before. And in her eyes you see what you're fighting for. So hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show her who you are. Oh, light a candle so that she can see. Oh, your lighthouse shining to the next right thing. Oh, so hold steady to your northern star. Oh, brave enough to show her who you are.